meeting will come to order. I'm assuming that we have all the technical issues hammered out. Let the record show the meeting started at 9:13. We are now holding our regularly scheduled meeting held Tuesday, March 10th, 2015 at 9:13 a.m.
Chairman Davis?
Yes.
We have sound, but we don't have video yet. We'll have video in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Well, in my case, how fortunate can the audience be? Okay. All right.
They can hear us, correct?
Yes. So, okay. So we have audio, but we do have the media here, and so we'll go ahead and continue, Commissioners, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think it'll take a couple of minutes to get through the pledge and all that stuff.
All right.
State it slow.
At this time, I'd like to call on Mr. Jeffrey R. Smith, the Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller, to give the invocation, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to be given by Commissioner Peter O'Brien. Please rise.
Let us pray. Father, thank you for getting rid of the gremlins and the technical stuff this morning. But we praise you for who you are and are grateful for what you provide for us. In our haste of everyday life, Lord, we take this time to pause and to seek your face. We seek your strength, your wisdom, and your direction for our lives and the lives of the citizens of Indian River County. Touch these 5 commissioners and give them the guidance on the decisions to be made and for your will to be done. Lord, we ask also a special protection of those who serve us and protect us all over the world and locally. Lord, just give them a hedge of protection and bring them back to us safely. These things we pray in your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The video's up and running. Everything's going.
Everything's back to normal. For those that just now have gotten the audio and the video, we had some technical difficulties, but got it back running. And thank you very much to staff and our technical crew for pulling that off so quick. At this time, we'll move on to the additions or deletions to the agenda and any emergency items. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add one item. It's more of a timely matter than emergency, but it's kind of an extension on some legislative updates to my other item on there. I'd like to add that as 14D2.
We have an emergency item, 14D2, Commissioner O'Brien's matters under FAC legislative update. Is there any other modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the orders of the day.
Second.
Got a motion from Commissioner Flesher with a second from Commissioner O'Brien. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. That moves us to the proclamations and presentations. We have none. We'll move into the minutes of the...
Chairman, move approval of minutes of the February 17, 2015 meeting.
Got a motion from Commissioner O'Brien to approve the minutes of February 17, 2015, and a second by Commissioner Flesher. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll proceed to vote.
Hopefully it'll help soon.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Anything under the information items, Commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I'd like to pull B, please.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're doing the information items?
Yes.
We'll go ahead and just talk about it.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to do.
And it's your turn. Go ahead.
Appreciate that, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
Bob, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah,
we're trying to figure it
As
out.
soon as the chairman lets me, I'll be happy.
Item 7B.
That's 7B exactly, on your agenda. It's about the Spoonville Marsh Eco Walking Tour this weekend. The Department of Utility Services will open the Spoonville Marsh Wetland for an Eco Walking Tour on Saturday, March 14th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The entrance is hard to see, but I'm pretty sure that the Utility Department will put a sign there. It's right at 57th Street, approximately a half mile north of 53rd. So basically it's right when you pass the North Relief Canal. Spoonville Marsh is a wonderful facility, and I think if you have the time on Saturday to take a tour, you'll appreciate what the county has done with your tax dollars. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Would anybody like to talk about item A? Seeing none, we'll move into the consent agenda. Commissioners, is there anything that you'd like to have pulled? Is there anything that anybody from the public would like to have pulled from our consent agenda for separate discussion and or vote?
Move approval. Second.
Seeing none, I've got a motion to approve the consent agenda from Commissioner Flesher with a second from Commissioner Zort. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. That moves us to the constitutional officers and governmental agencies. We have the Indian River County Sheriff's item, the Florida Traffic Safety Grant funded by the Florida Department of Transportation. This is a letter dated February 27, 2015, found on pages 118 through 133 in your backup. Welcome.
Approval.
Got a motion from Commissioner Flesher.
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Zort to approve. Would you like to say anything?
No, sir.
Okay.
Great
All right.
presentation.
Just another outstanding presentation by Amber. Yes.
Weeks.
We've got a motion to approve. If there's further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
And please tell the chairman that I approve this one.
I will.
Yes.
I mean the sheriff.
the sheriff.
I said the sheriff.
You said the chairman.
No, sheriff.
The audio's working.
The sheriff.
I may have mispronounced, but yesterday at an event, he accused me of always voting against him. It was always 4-1, so I just
Gotcha.
wanted you to go home and tell him that I was happy to support this one.
I certainly will.
But
Thank
you still want those quarterly reports.
Oh, absolutely, but that wasn't...
And moving on. Okay.
I'm sure he already knows
What
about your
moves us into the public items. This is the water main assessment project within the North Indian River Drive public hearing and adoption of resolution number 3, the memorandum dated February 20th, 2015, found on pages 134 through 158 in your backup. And I see we have Arjuna. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chairman, for the record, Arjuna Verugada, Capital Projects Manager. I have today for your consideration is the Indian River Drive water assessment project, and it's a public hearing phase of that project. Just have a brief presentation just to highlight some of the project specifics that has happened throughout this process, because it's been almost a 3-year process. So I'd just like to go through some of the items here.
Ooh.
Oops, I need to.
Dizzy. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's going back to the last slide here. Right, hold on. Okay.
That's just,
And we thought Presley was from.
this is like
See,
president.
this is Jason Brown's and Winnie's Prezi presentations. which-
They're forcing
So-
you to use it, right?
Correct.
1 or 2?
I'd like to highlight some of the critical timelines on this project. The residents actually came to the county in 2012 for this phase of the project, which was actually literally from where the existing main terminates to about Mr. Franklin's residence. And before this, actually, there was a unsuccessful project that was which was actually also planned as an assessment project in 2006, which went all the way from North US 1 to 129th place. And then with this phase, we had our first informational meeting in October 2013, and the crux of that meeting was actually to bring in some preliminary cost to the residents, and then for them to actually have voted again with the cost. The residents actually were unsuccessful in getting the 66 2/3. So they came to the board April 2014 requesting the board move the project forward. So with that, staff went ahead and secured permits, DEP permits, and completed the design, and also obtained the county right-of-way permit. And we brought Resolution 1 and 2 to the board January 6, 2015. And the board adopted Resolution 1 and 2, and here we are today, at the public hearing. Just want to let you know the adoption of Resolution 1, what board authorized was scenario number 2. And with that, the board also authorized, pending on what happens today, for the department to loop the line all the way to Roseland Road. So with scenario number 2, staff also looked at another scenario for board's consideration today, which we call it scenario number 3. So I'll get into more details of those scenarios, throughout the presentation here. So scenario number 2 is what you have seen previously and what the residents have seen. So this scenario entails 17 parcels within the assessment area. Highlight of this scenario is that you don't have the necessary 66 and 2/3. With this scenario, what you have is 65% of the residents in favor of the project. So I'm not getting into too many details on this one because this was what was presented on January 6th. And then what we did was we went back and looked at another scenario, which was scenario number 3. This actually, what we envisioned this to be is the original petition, which was started in 2012, but I think one of the residents just outside of this scenario requested to be connected to county water too. And that's how we kind of came with scenario number 2, in the same time frame. So what this scenario is looking at is the 10 parcels in the assessment area and the remainder to be in a voluntary portion. And with this scenario, what you have is here, let me zoom in. What you have is 8 out of 10 parcels in favor of the project. And the two property owners that are not in favor they are both vacant parcels. So basically you have 80% in favor of the project. And just a note, on both scenarios, the utilities department's commitment to the project is approximately 32% of the project cost. And then also in both scenarios, what we recommend, staff is recommending, is to loop the line all the way to Roseland Road, just for redundancy, water quality. It only makes sense to really go ahead and do that. And also, it's I think if you do separate the lines, it can be an undue inconvenience on some of the residences too in the future. So with that scenario, what we did was, after resolution number 2 was actually resolution number 1 was adopted, we mailed out certified letters to the homeowners and informed them of the informal meeting that we had at the Utilities Conference Room on February 4th. And then also within the letter, we actually sent an estimated monthly cost for the folks, based on a 5,000-gallon consumption. So as you can see, if you finance the capital cost for 10 years, and then the impact fee could be financed for 5 years, years 1 through 5, your average bill would be about $110. And years 6 through 10 would be about $86, and then thereafter it would just be your consumption cost. So that was something that we wanted to share with the folks on, some of the, because I think the biggest thing was, looking at the capital cost, and as being a one-time fee, it was a big number. But when you break it down to the monthly, it was somewhat bearable. And then we also looked at, pending what the board does today, we looked at some of the estimated schedules, because that was one of the questions that we have been asked many times. When could we actually see this in the ground? So, we are estimating advertising this May 2015, and then notice to proceed somewhere around August 2015, and final completion in December 2015. And then resolution 4, which would be your as-built resolution, somewhere January 2006. These are all estimated time frames, but sometime this year, we could have the residents hooked up to county water. And the next slide I have is actually it's the staff's recommendation, but I don't want to get into too many details because this is a public hearing, and I think I just want to clarify why we recommended scenario number 3. A couple of the reasons is that this stays within the Ordinance 8127 of meeting the 66 2/3, and also we feel like this will not set a precedence moving forward with any of the assessment projects. So staff actually is recommending adopting resolution number 3 with scenario number 3 and all the items A through D. So with that, Chairman, I suggest opening it up for the public hearing.
I do have, and maybe it was in there, I just couldn't find it. Let's suppose, in this situation, for the most part, we're close to our ordinance. But even then, I think, as one commissioner here, I'm very cognizant of any heavy hand by the government coming in and saying, you will do this, and if you don't, we're going to assess your property. It sticks with me right here. Now, with that said, there's clearly, I'm going to say, substantial support for the project. Now, let's give an example. Give me an example of what an interest rate may be for somebody that would have a vacant piece of property that simply maybe they've got a very expensive piece of land that it's everything they could possibly be doing just to pay the taxes on it. They don't homestead it, do not live there, do not enjoy any of the benefits of a homestead exemption. And they're going to be forced to do this. And let's suppose they just, the lien is there. We're not charging them an 18% if they just let that sit on the property. I imagine there's some kind of an interest rate, but is it an 18% interest rate if they just say, listen, y'all do what you got to do, I can't pay it, and hopefully by the time I sell the property, there'll be something left over after the government gets done.
The interest rate's 5 3/4%.
Yes.
Is that if they only keep it current?
No, that's their whole assessment.
Okay, no, that's what my question is there any mechanism in which we can keep a punitive interest rate from being imposed on specifically the ones that are outside of the
assessment area?
Yes, the assessment area.
There's not a punitive interest rate. It's basically it's a 5.75% is,
and that's only if they have the ability to pay it. Y'all understand what I'm saying? There's going to be a base capacity charge.
No.
No. Okay. There won't
No.
be. All right. So for the line extension fees and that, if you have somebody here that cannot afford this, and we lien their property, and they don't pay it, what's the interest rate?
5 3/4.
Perfect.
yes.
Okay.
And we vote on that annually.
Okay.
So
I
we
just
have
wanted to make sure.
the
Correct.
the ability to make sure it doesn't go to 18.
I have just seen some scenarios where our interest rate is 18%, and that's for base capacity charges.
Some very old assessments have, I don't know about 18%, but much higher than the 5 3/4. But the board has adopted the 5 3/4
Okay.
several years in a row. This project, if it were adopted to move forward today, would always have that 5 3/4% interest rate.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions before we open the public hearing?
Yep.
Seeing none. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak regarding this issue? Yes, ma'am. Come on up, please. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Janie Franklin. My husband's Harlan Franklin, and we live at the north end of the project. And I would very much love to have some real county water. Oh, thank you for the public hearing this morning regarding putting in a county water line in our part of Indian River and Sebastian. We appreciate your time very much. You've been very patient with us as we've been pleading for a water line for over 10 years. Sam and Ruth Ann Jolly and Karen and Steve McElvin were working on this a long time ago. Your staff has been very accommodating and helpful to us, and we appreciate them keeping us informed on the issues. And they have been so helpful to us. Aside from smelling like a swamp in the morning when I take my bath or brush my teeth, it's a real wake-up call. The well water has very many unpleasant experiences for me. We've twice lost our well pump when I need to go somewhere and I can't take a bath. It's terrible. Anyway, I could go on, but I won't. There are also a lot of costs associated with well water. We're both kind of elderly, so we can't do a lot of this stuff ourselves. But we have to pay to have solar salt and filter changes and associated costs with that. And that yearly costs us $576. The second time we lost water completely, I made my husband buy Zephyr Hills water supply. And I said, the worst part will be you carrying 3-gallon jugs in to fill up my bathtub. But anyway, that yearly costs $380. We have a cost of electricity to run the well pump, the cost of repair and replacement, cost of flushing out the lines with chlorine when we do have these stoppages. And finally, we got a reverse osmosis system that only works in the kitchen sink. That cost $657, but we were glad to have it. As I said, at our age, this is a lot to deal with. I could go on, but you get the point. Please, please, this is a small project that we've been working on for a long time. Please vote us a water line, and we will all be so happy, and it will be a great Christmas present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Welcome. Sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Mark Alejandro, and my son and I have the property at 13650 and 13655 on North Indian River Drive. It seems to be, it's under my assumption that the cost to run this line past our property, we're looking at over $12,000. I kind of object to all this fee. I don't think it's reasonable at this time. I can see some of the other residents with the water quality not being up to par. We have an artesian well that goes down 1,300 feet. The water comes out crystal clear. It's ice cold. I don't have to use a filtration system. We don't have any smell, and we're right on the edge of the water. I see they have adopted a scenario number 3 now where, if it's to my understanding, that they can go ahead with the project and it would exempt our property from having to pay this fee at this time. And it's under my understanding that if and when we decide to connect to it, then we would pay at that point. I could agree to something like that, but to just come out and spend all this money up front when we just paid over $8,000 in taxes last year. And, I don't object to the other residents. I feel for them too, but, we have an excellent well. And I'm asking them to see if they can adopt the amendment number 3 or option number 3, and it's like I said, it's under my understanding that I won't have to pay until it's connected up, until we decide if and when we want to connect. And
Mr. Chairman.
Sure. First of all, Arjun, can you address that?
Yes, actually, Mr. Alejandro he's got 2 properties, so that's why you see the double the cost. Option number 3, the one that the staff is recommending, he would be outside of the assessment area. So he would be based on a voluntary connection. If and so when he decides to connect, then he would have to actually satisfy the capital cost as well as the impact fees. So, thank you.
And again, that's exactly how you feel. I would say is the how this entire board feels. And we're trying to be as accommodating as we possibly can with the residents that live there that do want to have the better quality, in their opinion, water. And so I think staff's done as good as they possibly can to try to make it so that you don't have a heavy hand from this commission, and at the same time, for those that do want the government service of municipal water, providing that, and it'll be there for you in the event that you do opt into it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time in coming down. Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Like to speak here?
Yes, fine. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Just name and address for the record, if that's okay.
My name is Ruth Ann Jolly. I live at 13590 North Indian River Drive. I live there permanently. This gentleman that just spoke does not live in the house that he owns, he does not live here. Okay. The people that have applied for this water are permanent residents, and that's why we live there. That's why we want the water and need the water badly. He has 2 parcels. We have 3 parcels. We own property across the street that's included in this. Yeah. And but we know the expense, but we still would like the water very much. And we've been looking to get the water for a long time. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I hope Sam gets to feeling better.
Thanks.
Anybody else from the audience wish to speak? Anyone else? Okay. I think in that case, we will conclude this public hearing. Let the record show that ample opportunity to address this issue has been provided to all. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Fletcher.
I'd like to make motion to move option number 3, items A through D.
Second. Got a motion from Commissioner Fletcher to move option 3, A through D, and a second from Commissioner Zort. If there's no further discussion, we'll proceed to vote.
Just,
yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to support the motion. You know, the other scenario, including the 19 parcels, I know that we were close at 65% compared to our 66 2/3, but I always felt that, you know, we have a number, we should stick to it, and if we start saying, well, we're close, or we're going to accept that, to me that leads to a slippery slope. Okay, if 65 was close, isn't 63 just as close? And it kind of goes downhill from there. With the scenario 3 that the motion is at 80%, I realize there's 2 parcel owners that we will be impacting, but at 80%, I have a very good comfort level moving forward with that. And so I think, in my mind, that's the big difference. You know, 65 was close, but it wasn't our number. 80% is a very, very solid majority, and I feel good moving forward with that. So I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Absolutely. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously, and I'd like to thank staff for the creativity in this one. This was a tough one where you had some, you know, about like beach for nourishment. I've got friends that are for it and friends that are against it, and I'm for my friends. So appreciate y'all helping out with this. Thank you. Thanks. Hey, thank you.
We're going to get 18 minutes from that.
Our next item is the public discussion. We have item B1, which is to request to speak from Mike DeGeorge and Sherry Davis, President and Vice President, respectively, of Trillium Homeowners Association regarding 66th Avenue road constructions bids obtained for landscaping. Commissioners, this is found on pages 159 through 168 in your backup. Mike, welcome.
Yep.
Sherry, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners.
Mike, you don't have to get too close to it.
Okay.
It'll muffle it, so just talk like that.
Okay. My name is Mike DeGeorge. I'm the president of Trillium HOA. My co-presenter is Mrs. Sherry Miller Davis, who is the vice president. We have the 3 competitive bids as requested by the commissioners for the landscape east and west of the sidewalk on 66th Avenue. Since our January meeting, I have done some research. As you can see in the packet that you received, it's just basically showing that those planting beds have been part of the Trillium 66th Avenue landscaping scenery since 2004. And I have since also found a letter that Mr. Bill Handler sent to Mr. John McCoy November 17, 2004, and just one sentence. It says, as discussed, all required landscaping outside of the project wall shall be installed prior to the completion of any homes or requests for COs. I have a copy if you want. I didn't put that in your package. Okay. I think it is important to point out that when the county purchased the property from Trillium, the deal was between the county and the builder. Had nothing to do with the residents.
Another reason that we'd like to keep those beds is that they have been there from the beginning, as Mike stated. Also, currently, when you drive along 66th Avenue, you can tell that there seems to be a little bit of a lack of some of the landscaping from 26th to 33rd. And those landscaping beds, I think, would add to the value of the community. We all know that the county takes great pride in all of the roadways. It's very apparent that in the medians and anywhere in the county when there's something that's deteriorated, the county's reacted promptly and replaced those. Trillium's Board of Directors also, we take great pride in the standards of our community. We do believe that it is one of the premier communities to live in. So basically, we're only asking to be made whole, to put back and replace what was damaged prior to, nothing more, nothing less. Also, Mike and I are here today, basically, along with several of our residents, to request that the favorable decision be made for Trillium and the county. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, you got something you could help us out with this on?
Sure. Chris Mora, Public Works Director. The staff's position is the same as it was prior when we brought this to the board, and that is that this landscaping and irrigation was installed by Trillium within the right-of-way, and we don't have any problem with it being in the right-of-way. Our problem only is that it should be at the subdivision's expense, not the county's. It's always been the county's policy that landscaping and irrigation, if allowed in the right-of-way, is their responsibility to maintain and keep up. Oftentimes, as on other projects, Oslo Road, 66th Avenue, some of our bridge projects, we have had to deal with landscaping installed by private subdivisions or private owners. And in the past, it's always been their responsibility to put back what was in the right-of-way. So our position, we did follow up and get 3 bids for this work. We separated it out east of the sidewalk and west of the sidewalk. The lowest bid, I think Mike may have mentioned, was actually Trillium's landscaper of choice, which was Coast to Coast Landscaping. They came in at $12,355. They were the lowest of the 3 bids that we received, and west of the of that $12,355, west of the sidewalk was $6,300, and east of the sidewalk was just a little over $6,000. So about split down the middle. But our position is unchanged. We feel that that's should not be paid by the county.
You know, we've done probably, I think you've got a list of subdivisions, and it's a national standard. Anything in the right-of-way, if you has to be any landscaping, pretty well nationally. If you put it in and they have to take it out for any type of expansion, for power companies, that it's the subdivision's responsibility. And we've applied that rule for years consistently. This would be inconsistent, and other subdivisions have all had to pay. I actually lived in one that had a special assessment over it, so it's understood.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Zort.
Chris, and this is probably more of a planning question, but when the landscaping ends up on a site plan, if it's in the right-of-way area, shouldn't there be some kind of notation or a big stamp that says landscaping in the right-of-way portion is the responsibility of the developer or future HOA? Is that addressed on there anywhere, Stan?
Sure, I'll take that. For the record, Stan Bowling, Community Development Director. Essentially, in the case of Trillium and many development projects, there are landscape buffers, landscape strips that are privately owned and maintained, and that's where the required landscaping goes in those areas. There are occasions when things are planted or growth goes into rights-of-way, and as was explained earlier, that's at the sufferance of whoever holds the right-of-way. So a lot of times I think vegetation is allowed to be in right-of-way, and then when a project comes along, it's taken out. But required landscaping always goes on private property. The only exceptions to that is when there are maintenance agreements with the keeper of the right-of-way, like we have with DOT, and we have in county rights-of-way. Sometimes in medians we have landscaping there. But what a developer is required to put in landscape-wise goes on private property.
Right, but if on the site plan it shows landscaping in the right-of-way, I think just kind of for future might be a little handy if somewhere on that plan it's stamped or something that indicates that it's at your own risk or it's at your own...
Right. No, it's a point well taken. When inspections are done to see if the required landscaping is in, we follow the plans. The plans would only show the landscaping going in the correct place. Our inspections, we usually have the problem of not finding enough landscaping as opposed to finding too much. So I'm not sure that issue's really come up at the time of inspection.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
I understand this is a request for public speaking, and I don't know if we're going to see a formal vote today. Is that correct, that we're looking for consensus?
I wouldn't mind a vote on it. I mean, it's
You're
not the
chairman.
first time. Well, then it's not, I can't make a motion.
Well,
But,
Mr. Chairman,
No, but you would...
yeah, this isn't the first time this has come up.
That's because of that, and because we had a pretty good public hearing of it before. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody.
Sure.
So I'm probably as much a stickler on that one as anybody else, but I don't see
You're
any
comfortable.
reason for bringing them back a third time.
So I wanted to ask you this, since we did have already a hearing on it, and we did have voting to send them back and get estimates, and we all had the time to assess it, would it be a challenge if this was a consensus and handed administratively, since we did compel them to go out and get the 3 competitive bids? Or would you like to see this brought back?
No, I don't think we need to bring this back for a third time.
Well, with that case, I just wanted to offer then my opinion for consensus assessment. I understand that the value has been reduced due to the removal of the sprinkler systems, and that has been absorbed by the HOA and the groundskeeper. And in looking at this, you have to look at, I had to look at the fact that this project was moved. There is a jog in the road. It was at the request of the property owners, and the county did make that move. But there was talk of a conversation that occurred as the project was moving forward, and that was that you will be made whole again, that this will be revegetated to the expectations of what you see today. And there's some discrepancy or discussion whether it was prior to the jog in the road or what those words were said after the jog in the road. But I'd like to say that it's a very sensitive issue for us to move a project forward, and we hear the words taking, and we hear the words settlement. And it's very, very uncomfortable for all of us in thinking what the value should be and what we're doing with being good stewards of the tax dollar. But we move forward in good faith. And I mention good faith because if those words were spoken to the individuals as the project was moving forward, then we have to maintain that good faith and commitment and promise. And it's $12,000.
$12,000.
And it brings a community, a subdivision that's been a good tenant, tax-paying tenant of our community. It brings it back whole again. It's well-traveled in front of 66th Avenue, the mall. And I think that we have an obligation to make them whole again in full faith, without commitment. So I fully support their proposal to revegetate in the landscaped plan that they have.
Okay. Is that a motion?
That most certainly could be a motion if you choose it to be.
All right, motion it, and then I'll second it for discussion. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Zork.
I took the opportunity to take the very efficient golf cart tour of it, and I'm looking at this as breaking the number into the two figures, the 6,045, 6,310. to me, the west side of the sidewalk is the no-brainer. So really, then you're down to the 6,045 number. And if you look at the reduced landscaping that's not in the median strip when you get north of 26th Street, that you see south of 26th Street, that value would have been much greater than the $6,000. So I see it as, just kind of compensating that to put some of that back in. So I'm also being in support of this motion.
Any further discussion?
Mr.
After you.
Go ahead, Commissioner O'Brien.
I'll be voting against the motion. I think we're setting a terrible precedent. I think everyone received the backup from Chris Moore that showed over about 15 other projects where landscape was impacted in the right-of-way. We did not refund any money there. I think we're opening us up to now anytime we do a project in the right-of-way, we now have to replace everything. I mean, again, gentlemen, I think if you make this decision, where's it going to stop? I mean, somebody puts a fence out in the right-of-way, are we going to replace that? I mean, this can snowball to be a huge expense. I've been past Trillium several times in the last, I guess it's been, about a month since you all were here? And Saturday, I actually walked the sidewalk looking at the vegetation. At some point, you all had, I guess, coast to coast, come in and cut everything way back to it's almost like kind of the bare wood sticking there. Almost every single one of those plants is resprouting right now. And the ones that weren't resprouting, I'll apologize for this in advance, I only did it once. But I took my knife and scraped one of the branches and it was completely green underneath. So all those plants are still alive. They're not dead. They're resprouting, they're re-leafing. Now that the project is done, when you were here before us, I committed that we would give you a permit to put the irrigation back in the right-of-way, and I'll make sure that happens, again, at your risk. But it seems to me with spring here, some watering, maybe a little fertilizing, that those beds will come back and be fine by the end of the growing season. So based on that, and based on the fact I think this is a terrible precedent to set, I'll be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner Solari.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'll also be voting against the motion. I'm pretty sure that the last time they were here from Trillium that I indicated that I could cut the baby in half and go for everything that was on the inside of the sidewalk, and I think that I can justify that to myself with the idea that we ought to have been more careful on that. But I agree with what Commissioner O'Brien has said about setting the wrong type of precedent. I truly appreciate everything Trillium does to make the place look nice and all, but I believe that the county, in the total scope of the project, and especially in the way they changed the layout of 66th Avenue at Trillium's request, have done the appropriate things for this project.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to, again, not in defense of the motion, I just wanted to add that we were given a list of 16 projects that were not paid for, that the HOAs had to pay for that. The challenge is that I did not have the opportunity to speak to those individuals and find out if they were committed, promised, expressed full faith that they would be made whole again. I could not determine whether that conversation took place. In this instance, I could confirm it, and I have beyond a reasonable belief that the conversation did take place from the county with the individuals regarding the restoration of the frontage, and that's what I'm basing my vote on, is the fact that they were committed and promised, and we have to stand by our word. It has nothing to do with the 16 parcels that were not in that process.
There's not only 16. Every homeowner that we get that has a fence and we have to go in and repair something on the right of way, there's hundreds and there's thousands have had to pay. This is a really bad exception, and it's usually a national standard. That's what we've applied as your staff, and we think it's appropriate. There's hundreds and thousands of property owners that we've had to remove and they've put it back. Their landscaping, their fences. You're just going down a very slippery slope.
And although I didn't support it, just several weeks ago, just right down the road, an additional $10,000 was added to an individual's parcel so that they can be made whole again, with the promise that all of their amenities that were changed or altered during the project were then committed that we would restore them, and the $10,000 in addition. It's a motion which I didn't support, but it did exist and it did go forward.
That's another exception.
For drainage? Is that drainage?
Oh, it was a variety of things
somebody's
that
speaking?
were added. Thank you.
Oh, if you do want to speak, after come on up here so the public can hear, please. Is there any further discussion? You know, I respect the opinions of my two fellow colleagues that perhaps we're going to vote against this, but my question is in the process of whenever this whole project came forward, had it been as far as the budgeted expense of doing the road, and said something to the lines of, because we have made the median narrower, we're going to take some of that landscape and we're actually going to put it closer to, or put it between the sidewalk and the edge road right away to the west. That could have come in for this amount of money. And in all candor, had I realized at that time that this would have been one of those scenarios where we could have taken the landscape out of the middle and put it between the residents and the road, and it would have been totally appropriate and probably supported by this entire board as far as a unanimous vote when we have approved the project. So I'm not looking at this as we have a discontent group of homeowners in Trillium that demanding something done that was in the county's right-of-way. I'm seeing this as an enhancement project that, quite frankly, in my opinion, should have been a part of the project to begin with. So I'll be supporting the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I also respect your opinion. To me, it's not a dollar issue. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's $12,000 or $6,000 or $20,000 or whatever it's going to be spent. I just think it's setting a bad precedent going back after the fact and replacing things in the right of way. And also, in my mind, I think the things are coming back, and it'll look fine in 6 months with some water and a little attention to it. And then, Chris, wasn't there a cost when we redid this whole design to shift the road? I know we had engineering costs. We had to go back to DOT and ask them to extend the grant window so we could get all this done.
Right. There were redesign engineering costs, consultant engineering fees, and then staff time. Yes.
Right. So, you know, if we want to argue, you know, is it a wash of dollars? I'd say, well, we've already spent more than the landscaping by accommodating their request to change the design. So, but I just think it's a bad precedent to set, and I do, you know, Trillium is a nice subdivision, and I appreciate all that, but you know, I have to look down the road at the big picture, and that's just kind of where I sit. But
yeah, we'll come back except for where you whittled.
And you know,
I think it'll be okay. It's just a little. I apologize for that one branch.
I think we've everybody's articulated their position well enough on this. Unless there's something else somebody needs to add to, we'll go ahead and vote. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of Commissioner Flesher's motion signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion passes 3-2 with Commissioner O'Brien and Solari dissenting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Next we have
I need the motion repeated, please.
You need the motion to repeat again?
Yes,
Commissioner
please.
Flesher, help me with it.
The motion is to accept the bid that the
Coast to coast.
individuals have from coast to coast to totally restore the frontage at Trillium, located at 66th Avenue and 26th Street.
Leon, are you clear on that?
Yes, thank you.
Please, anytime that you don't get anything like that, you're probably the only person that can stop this meeting so we don't have to do this twice. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the request to speak from Mr. Lanson. Thank you. Dan, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Dan Lamson, the Executive Director of the Indian River Neighborhood Association, and I have a short statement to read on behalf of our Water and Lagoon Committee. The IRNA asks you to please reconsider your decision not to participate in the Indian River Lagoon Interlocal Council. We understand your principal objection that voting membership is not limited to elected representatives from the contiguous counties. However, we think there is a good reason for the county to be a full participant. To fully restore the lagoon's water quality, there will have to be major government-sponsored projects, extension of the county's and municipalities' sewer collection and treatment systems, installations of filters or diversion piping for road runoff, and additional staff for enforcement of fertilizer application. At least the first of these projects will cost large sums of money. It's appropriate because the lagoon is a state and regional, national, and economic asset that the costs be shared by a broader base than our local property owners' taxes. Fortunately, state and the regional water management districts have indicated that subsidies are and will be available. The problem for Indian River County is that we have not attracted the public attention for these subsidies at the government entities at the lagoon's north end and south ends. In the north, the Banana River area because of its lack of flushing, and in the south, the overflows into the St. Lucie waterway system from Lake Okeechobee. Even with representation on the council, money to restore our section of the lagoon will require effort. But without an inside voice to speak up for us, it could well be impossible. Furthermore, it has been demonstrated that changing the council's voting and membership structure by not participating has not worked. It could well be that correcting the changes that Commissioner Solari has proposed to be adopted may require a seat at the table. Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you very much for coming down and addressing.
Chairman?
Yes.
Only because in the years I've been here, this is really the first time my position has disagreed with the IRNAs, and I can only believe that it's because they don't really fully understand the way that process actually went down. I would like to offer to come before your group at any time so they can get a full explanation of it, because it goes well beyond anything that you mentioned today. So I only think that you're here today because there hasn't been a full understanding of that process, and I'll take any opportunity to give a fuller disclosure at your convenience.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, Dan, just also want to point out that the county has put in two major projects, our skimmer project on the main canal and the Egret Marsh out west of town, that are removing thousands of pounds of nutrients as we speak right now. The county did those projects on our own. We didn't need this council telling us what to do. We did go out and use some of our money and some grant money that we procured on our own. The Spoonville Marsh project and then the Osprey Marsh project are kind of combination projects where we have those projects to help dilute the brine from the water plants, but also they're designed to have a net positive impact to the lagoon. We have a pending septic to sewer project in Sebastian that we are moving forward, and we've requested some grant assistance from the legislature this session. So I understand what you all are asking, but I look at it as we've been very proactive without this, quote, blessing of this council. And I think all 5 commissioners are committed to continuing to move forward projects. You know, we want to do another oyster reef project. We're looking at surface water supply. So you know, we're moving. We have moved forward. We have a couple innovative, state-of-the-art projects already working. We are working on others. You know, we will continue to do all of these projects with or without this council. I have grave concerns how this council is going to end up, quite frankly. And I think that if you look at all of the positions that they have kind of talked about, that a lot of that money is going to go to administrative overhead. And I'd rather take our $50,000 share and build another oyster reef with it every year and then put a project in the ground and get things done than to pay for a lot of administrative bureaucracy. And you know, it's funny, at their just last meeting, they had an EPA guy come and tell them what their obligations and responsibilities are now that they have taken ownership of the lagoon. And it just seemed to me, isn't that something you wanted to figure out before you volunteered to take something over? I mean, you know, so just this thing was rushed, and a lot of behind the scenes things going on. And when things like that happen, I need to take a step back and see what happens. But I can promise you I will continue to push for projects to improve the lagoon. I think all 4 of these other commissioners will give you that same pledge. And we have been leaders, and we will continue to lead in innovative projects to help clean up the lagoon with or without the council. We adopted a very strong fertilizer ordinance, and then the municipalities came along and joined us. So, I think we're committed to doing the right thing. Appreciate your position and such, but I just have some real grave concerns about how that council is formulated and where they're going. And so I'd rather put our money into doing projects we can, put in tomorrow and move forward that way. So that's just kind of where I am.
And Dan, if I'm just kind of, not to beat this to death, but I guess really the NEP, the National Estuary Program's timing could not have been at more of a less opportune time. Whenever this community right now has on its shoulders boards that have power and authority over the residents of this community that affect their quality of life. And by that I say, they're just like the FMPA. They consist mainly of non-elected bureaucrats of some kind that are sucking $20 million out of this community right now. And I don't know how to get rid of any one of them. I can't even move to that community to run against them and do it the old-fashioned way if I had to. But and I'll even go further than that. The All Aboard Florida situation, that is from a group of unelected bureaucrats from South Florida that have thought it was a good idea to get to Orlando quick, that got with another group of unelected bureaucrats that's called the Orlando Expressway Authority that gave them the opportunity to go across the B-line. And between the toes of these 2 groups of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that I don't know how to get rid of is our community. I don't want to do that again.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You forgot FUMPA. I mean, FUMPA is an unelected, unaccountable bureaucracy that was set up to support the municipalities that were supposed to be serving the citizens. And we've clearly seen, Commissioner Zork has clearly demonstrated to us that they're not only fully unaccountable, they don't care what we say. And this is one of the problems when you set up these bureaucracies over which there is no real control. They may say there's local control, but the way they function absolutely emasculates any chance of real local control over it.
And so please don't take it wrong. This is not directed to you. I'm pretty passionate about how I feel on it, as you can tell, as my fellow colleagues are. And this isn't for or against a lagoon. I mean, for somebody to paint it that way, there's nothing further from the truth for any of the commissioners sitting up here. It's just philosophically how I feel about it, how Commissioner, all of us. And but we do appreciate your time, and I would love to be there, or I guess it may be a different time. I'd love to talk to the entire membership of the Neighborhood Association, because what you stand for is noble. It's very good, and I appreciate you being here to talk to us about this today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Chairman, if I might, there'll be a little bit more discussion similar to what you had brought up today, a little bit later in the meeting today, if you have time to stick around.
I was planning to.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
I'll save it for then.
Next, that moves us to the community development. Yes.
To the chair, if I may, normally under public notice items, we have all of our items. We actually have one under the SWID, but I just would like to announce it now, just in case there's somebody watching who's interested in any future issues. The SWID board has a notice of special call meeting for the award of the solid waste and recyclables collection services. This will be at a special call meeting to be held on Wednesday, March 18th, 2015 at 9 a.m. here in the County Commission chambers. Thank you, Chair, for at least letting me. This is the special call meeting on March 18th of the award.
I thought we said 9:30 because didn't
we did? Yeah.
I thought 9:30 was the IAFF union discussion on Friday.
Oh, that's true. On Friday was 9:30.
Okay, I stand
yes.
corrected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad we clarified.
Was at 9:30.
Yeah, I'm glad we clarified that. I just thought it'd be helpful to read that into the record and let the
That's
folks
probably
watching.
the coffee I'm going to have to owe you after this.
You'll be late for the other one then.
Yeah. The pressure's on. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Dylan. Next, we have the board consideration to terminate the contract with TSI Disaster Recovery LLC with payment for work performed and alternative for channel restoration at Head Island, a.k.a. Green Salt Marsh Conservation Area. This is a memorandum dated March 3rd, 2015, found on pages 170 through 198 in your backup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Roland Du Bois, Chief of Environmental Planning and Code Enforcement. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation related to this matter. This does relate to what's known as the Head Island Channel Restoration Project. Just briefly, this has been to the board a couple of times, but Head Island, also known as the Green Salt Marsh Conservation Area that the county received a donation back in 1996, is located off the South Barrier Island west of St. Christopher Harbor subdivision. This project is essentially entails the removal and reestablishment of an historic channel next to St. Christopher Harbor to allow for boater access to deeper water at a shorter distance than it currently exists, thereby helping direct traffic away from the shallow flats and the seagrasses in the area. The St. Christopher Harbor Property Owners Association or Homeowners Association is a partner in this project. They went through the initial steps of getting Army Corps and DEP permits. Essentially, the project entails removal of that land bridge, so to speak, and establish two breaches, one next to the land bridge excavation and another one to increase flushing. It also entails, as permitted or part of a grant project with FIND, an establishment of a small public boat landing. And it also entails removal of exotics from the perimeter dike of the Head Island. When this came to the board back in August of last year, at that time there were estimates of cost based on some initial estimates that the HOA got for the project. In particular, the barging and construction costs at that time were estimated about $115,000. After these estimates and moving forward, the board directed staff to obtain a request for proposals to get an actual bid before the project was finalized for funding. We did go through that process as approved by the board back in December. We ended up getting bids. The low bid was from a contractor called TSI Disaster Recovery. They ended up submitting a bid for $78,500 for the excavation work and mobilization. And with that bid, we were able to accommodate the St. Christopher Harbor HOA's commitment at that time for funding, which was credited for the permit cost of $38,000. They had also committed to and still are committed to an additional $16,750 towards the project. So that's how it proceeded. We got TSI under contract, and they commenced the work. The TSA contract, or the contract to contract, on the overhead, it breaks down the tasks that they were items within their contract for mobilization, removal of fill, including siltation control, breaching the dikes, removal of exotics from the perimeter dikes, and eventually installation of some signage. To date, they've completed parts of the project, which I'll go over, have some photos of, but essentially they've mobilized, they've implemented siltation control, they've completed the exotics eradication from the perimeter dikes, and accounting for demobilization, the work performed thus far comes to a total of $31,499. Here's a few pictures of what's been accomplished. They cleared the channel area, prepped it for the excavation, deployed the silt turbidity barriers, deployed their barge and excavation equipment. They silt screened the temporary staging areas for the fill. They cleared also the southern breach area, preparing it for excavation. And they completed the perimeter dike exotics treatment using basal bark herbicide treatment, which staff has verified and has been completed satisfactorily. One of the issues, though, that has come up and what we're here for today is an unforeseen circumstance related to the bid of TSI on off-site disposal of fill. The bid that TSI bid on did have attached to it the Army Corps and DEP permits, which had the condition that all fill generated shall be disposed of at an upland site. When TSA did the bid, they assumed that there was sufficient uplands on the perimeter dikes adjacent to the excavation such that they could use those uplands to dispose of the fill. Subsequent to their bid and mobilization, just to verify that the level of uplands on the dikes, we had a field meeting with Army Corps of Engineers. That took a little while to set up, but in the meantime, staff gave the contractor authority to proceed with the exotics treatment since they're already mobilized, moving towards that meeting to determine the disposal opportunity. The finding was that although there were areas of uplands on portions of the dike, it was insufficient to accommodate the fill. And this is a unforeseen circumstance that has essentially become an issue. To address that, we worked with TSI. We've contacted another engineer just to look at the various opportunities. TSI came in with a proposed change order for what it would cost to do off-site disposal that they didn't anticipate. And they came up with a substantial increase in potential cost, $167,000, and then a per diem rate. This would essentially, the concept here would be to do some barging to St. Christopher Harbor for a staging area on one of the vacant lots out there and then have it trucked off. In the end, it would have resulted in the project overall being over $300,000, which is well beyond the project budget. So we ran into some significant issues there. As part of this process of determining what would be the opportunity for completion under the off-site disposal, we got a separate engineer's estimate who worked with a qualified contractor to just look at alternatives. One alternative they looked at was a land-based dredging of the material and trucking off-site using small equipment as opposed to the more expensive barging approach. And that would bring the project or portion total to $127,000, which is still a bit more than what's currently budgeted. Bring the overall project cost to about $224,500. Under this approach, if the county wanted to proceed with this alternative and issue an RFP for the follow-up, it would require the homeowners association cooperation to use their private road as a land-based point for trucking and potential impacts to the road. Essentially, we've looked at various alternatives at this point. First alternative would be to hold the contractor, currently TSI, to the bid of $78,500 to finish the work despite their unforeseen circumstance and contractor's cost. From a staff perspective, we don't think that's reasonable. The other approach would be to approve TSI's change order proposal to substantially increase the funding scope of the project. Third would be to terminate the county's contract with TSI but pay them for work performed. And under that concept, staff's position is that the work they did perform does have public benefit and it's reasonable that they would be compensated for the work performed based on the public benefit of the exotics eradication. But under this alternative, it would be just to pay for work performed, discontinue any additional work on the project, and effectively end the project. Another alternative would be to terminate the contract with TSI with payment for work performed, but to follow up with another request for proposal for completion of the job with off-site disposal. If, from staff's perspective, if the county wants to move down this path, we think it would be appropriate, rather than just go into it and keep using staff time and efforts to come up with a new contract, is to upfront set a cap on the amount of funding that the board would commit to continue this project. Under that scenario, our position was a 50% contribution to the total cost would be reasonable, maybe setting a cap of $115,000, which is kind of based on the engineer's estimate of costs. Under this scenario or alternative, it would also require, however, the HOA to cooperate with the use of their private road for the off-site trucking, which would be part of it. and also potentially to commit to yet additional funding. Based on this, that alternative and scenario, the table that you have up on the overhead is a revised cost estimate with the assumption of the additional cost based on the estimate of the engineer's estimate for a new RFP to complete the job. It also assumes that the St. Christopher Harbor Homeowners Association would commit another level of funding, which would be based on the calculations of the engineer's estimate, approximately another 21, I think it comes to close to $22,000 of additional funding commitment from the HOA under this table scenario to move forward with that. And in the end, staff's recommending that the board proceed with terminating the agreement with the current contractor, TSI, with payment for work performed, which they've agreed to that from their end, and that would be a total of $31,499. We would also recommend setting a county payment contribution cap of 50% of the total project cost, not to exceed $115,000. Authorize staff to coordinate with St. Christopher Harbor HOA for authorization to use Island Drive and to obtain commitment for further funding as referenced, and to authorize staff to issue an RFP for completion of the work contingent upon the HOA's cooperation. And that's our recommendation at this point. I think Ms. Garamone, the HOA representative, I believe, said she would be in attendance. I'm not sure if she is, but she might be.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, Roland. Stan, anything you need to add?
The only thing, and Roland did a good job going over in his presentation, and this was mentioned in staff's report, just to give a little bit of perspective, in getting the TSI bid that came in at $78,500, the next closest bid was over $300,000, and TSI, had the ability, we thought, to do the work because they were in between barge projects, and they were already in an estuarine environment with the barge. We tried to work with them, and again, the unforeseen circumstances, the Army Corps field meeting, which took a while to get together. But staff's recommendation is that before any trying to finish out the project, that we need more cooperation from the HOA. And I know there's been concerns expressed by board members in the past times this has come up with the cost of the project. So we don't think the county should move forward unless a cap is set, and that's why we're recommending a cap. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, any questions of staff?
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
Did they determine that a portion of the fill could go on the uplands on the island, and that portion would then be placed there and the rest would be moved off-site, or did they just say, let's not put any there and move everything off-site?
I think technically there's an opportunity to put some level of fill in some portions of the dike, but practically it's just not cost-effective to do that partial placement if you have to mobilize for the bigger amount. So it's, in effect, it's really not a practical approach.
And second question, do we have any use for any fill material at either Round Island Park or down at some of the other public facilities that are very close to here or not as far away?
We looked at some locations. For example, the county owns one of its conservation areas just south is the Oyster Bar Marsh. There's some area in the upland portion that could be used. I think when we worked with the engineers on the engineer's estimate, the qualified contractor he worked with was willing to take the fill off the county's hands without cost. So it really wasn't an issue per se on to where it was going. The TSI looked at disposal cost if it was going to be taken to the county landfill, but again, we thought we could find it looked like we could find a contractor that could take it away without even those costs. So that really wasn't the issue.
Okay.
Commissioner Solari.
Roland and Stan, what they have done, the substantive thing they have done is they've removed the pepper trees and Australian pines, and this is a little tangential, but is there anything in place going forward that at least allows us to continue with that benefit?
Yes. The fact that they use basal bark treatment on the perimeter dikes, we did verify, and it's a good job. we expect that to be in effect for a while, and there's an opportunity to do follow-up on that to keep it in effect. They are standing on site. It's not a cleared path per se, but there certainly is that benefit.
Well, there's the benefit today, and we paid for that benefit. My issue is really going forward. We've done that similar type of thing on a number of islands within the county limits. But after 3 or 4 years, we sometimes forget about it. And, that was, more or less okay when we were stretched for funds from 2006 to 2011 and stuff. But I think that this is one of those areas where we need to be more aggressive in the future. These are, again, valuable assets of the county, but we, I think, not only underutilize them, but undercare for them. So as part of this today, I'd like to get some staff direction, and I'm not sure if it's the Community Development Department or if it's going to be Public Works, but going forward to at least revisit the management plan for some of these areas so that going forward we do appropriately at least allocate some minimal funds to maintain what's already been done, because it's a lot cheaper to maintain what's been done than it is to go back periodically and redo it. And I know in other islands it's worse than this because we actually have permit requirements, which I'm not sure we're in all cases fulfilling because we're not doing the proper annual maintenance on the project. So I just want us, given that this is done, to make sure we at least capture over time the value of it.
I do know that Parks Department, through their conservation program, does budget for exotic treatment annually, but we'll work with them to make sure it applies to this particular project.
Well, I'll bet dollars to donuts that what we budget annually at this time isn't sufficient to do the job, so I'd like us to be a little more aggressive going forward.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Roland, notwithstanding the Army Corps' jurisdictional issue, is there sufficient dike area and upland area to handle all of the fill?
No, that's the indication is not. I think the determination was there's approximately 1,400 cubic yards of fill that would ultimately be coming out. And there's just not enough of that adjacent on the dike areas to accommodate that.
And they can't run it down the dike any?
When Army Corps was out there, we looked at the linear length of the dike. Part of the issue is the upland portion is so narrow and sporadic that it just doesn't have the width to account for the slope and placement of the amount of fill that would be required.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner, any other questions? All right, I see that we have some residents from the community that may want to speak. They're certainly here to hear what is said and the actions. Is there anybody from the community that would like to speak at this time, or anybody from the public? No? All right. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to make a motion for alternative number 3, which is to terminate the county's contract with TSI with payment for the work performed, discontinue any additional work, effectively ending the overall project, but direct staff to come back with some sort of future proposal about or word or plan to maintain the value of the work that's already been done regarding the invasive species on the property.
I'll second that in discussion.
We've got a second from a motion from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner O'Brien for discussion. Commissioner O'Brien.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This started out as a really nice, feel-good kind of project, working with the community. It had a lot of positives to it. It was removing fill from submerged bottoms. By allowing a different access route for the boats would help protect the seagrass beds and potentially increase some flushing. But then we run into the federal bureaucracy and throws everything into a wrench in the works here. And I'm just not sure at that price that the project's worth it at this point. It's kind of priced it out of my ballpark. So that's just kind of where I am. I mean, I'd like to see it go through. But I just, unless the community wants to step up now and say, yeah, we're in, I just can't see it going forward on our dime.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioners? Okay. We got a motion on the floor. Anybody from the public wish to speak before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, at this time we'll take a brief, we'll take a 10-minute recess and reconvene at 10:43.
You know what? I could almost. Why didn't you get classified as a lobbyist? Oh, that's. See, that's why lawyers don't have to get sworn in, but whenever they. Doing well. Oh yeah. Yep.
Just to give them an idea of where what it looks like.
It's good to see you, sir. How are you? I am real good. What? Well, you know. That's the way it goes. You know, I was here with the Oslo Boat Bank conference in October, and I think the board voted 3-2 at that time to postpone that action for 3 to 5 years. And then I read the paper, something like one of your assistant attorneys or somebody like that is going forward with the application process. Okay, but you can go on record as saying something like, well, we're going to hold that in our pocket, but we will not use it. Then that's what I want to hear. I don't think it's going to be anything. Well, I was just concerned that you can. I understand. I'm not a professional. So at any rate, I appreciate you coming to talk.
Oh, yeah. All right. Y'all ready? Commissioner, where's Fletcher?
He's out.
There he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's a blur and a half. What's up with that?
Meeting will come back to order. We left off with the community development matters. If I could, please call the meeting back to order.
Yeah, put that stick to use.
Thank you.
I heard that.
Moves to the county attorney's matters. Mr. DeBrawl, welcome.
Thank you. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. Back in 2012, State Lands went ahead, the trustees of the Internal Improvement Fund through the Division of State Lands filed suit against 3 owners of the stilt houses out at Blue Cypress Lake. And if you take a look at the document at the dock camera, you'll be able to see the 3 structures that we're referencing. If we can get rid of the big ugly square that's in the middle of it, we'd be able to see. There we go.
Where is he?
There you can see the 3 stilt houses in question. The complaint was filed, as I said, in 2012 by the trustees. And the defendants in this case that are listed in the memo to the board filed an answer, and through the litigation they are claiming that the property underneath the stilt houses, the submerged land, is owned by the county. Not wishing to become embroiled in the litigation in the matter at hand, the Division of State Lands has asked us to supply them with a quitclaim deed, thus canceling any interest that we may have in the submerged lands underneath the houses. It's our position that we have no interest in the property, that we don't want to start to get into a situation where we would have to decide who should remain in these houses, if indeed it would be adjudged our property, the county's property. We have no business in submerged land. It's not at all unusual, if you can remember back to the moorings submerged lands, where we have dedicated that and deeded it back to the trustees, who we contend are the rightful owners of the property. So that's why I prepared the agenda matter today for the discussion of whether or not we should execute the quitclaim deed in favor of the trustees and hopefully keep us out of a lawsuit that is ongoing and for the last 3 years. So Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Vosell, representing 2 of the stilt house owners, are here. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, your light, please, Commissioner Slaughter.
Mr. DeBrawl, if you could help me on a couple things with the picture. I just want to make sure I understand the picture correctly. There's what looks like just to the south of or downward from the 3 stilt houses, a little more further towards the west. Further towards the west, it looks like a channel.
Yes.
Is that a natural channel or a man-made channel?
It would be hard to say.
Okay.
There's been a lot of different excavations that have taken place.
I'm going to go. Let me help him with that. None of these are natural channels.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about an area that is not all natural. That's been disturbed in multiple ways all around for probably some hundreds of years.
Yes. About the only natural channels that you're going to find are going to be Mudfish Slough, Blue Cypress Creek, and Paget Branch.
Just want to make sure I understood the surrounding area.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
Commissioner. Councilor, I was just wondering, where were we as a county when those 3 dwellings were erected? I understand they were during the hurricanes. There was some damage done, but where were we during that process when those buildings were erected?
I'm not sure.
As far as observation, presence, knowing that they're happening.
There have traditionally been stilt houses out on Blue Cypress since the 40s and 50s. Have they risen to single-family homes that are out there like this now, no. They've been basically hunting shacks propped up on stilts.
And this is kind of where I am on this, guys. The fact of the matter is there's a lock, there's a structure at the north end of a canal called M, which is the very northern part of Blue Cypress Lake. And they regulate how much of that water flows from there to Jacksonville. And if that were back to its natural state and that water naturally flow north the way Mother Nature designed this system to work, this would probably be dry land for 6 months out of the year, at least. Right now, it's held back, which I have no problem with it. I mean, the water, because it just is what it is. But this is something that I think that really the Water Management District has created, and now they're calling it submerged lands, and now they would like to have it back after they've created a wetland that somebody's got a structure on.
That's a great point. As you indicated that, and the canals do appear that they were manufactured, or they're definitely not natural creation the way they're lined. And we're going back to several hundred years of history on this. We're going back to when Florida was created or purchased. And when we look at what was purchased, that may have been very well all dry land. So now we're looking at it, well, it's wet, so it's submerged.
I mean, the aerial photos, as far back as they go, tend to differ with that idea that it was all submerged lands back then, even before some of the canals were put in and the dredging took place. If you look back at the early minutes of commission meetings back in the 50s, there was great concern that commercial fishing was overfishing Blue Cypress Lake, and that additional roads were needed to be put in, that certain safeguards as far as somebody at the park would need to kind of monitor the situation and hopefully prevent some commercial overfishing of the lake.
Well, I just want to point out, Councilor, I've been out there day and night. I've observed what's there, but I can't really see what's on one side because I don't have a boat. But does that land, is that kind of shallow? From the aerial, it appears that it's extremely shallow. And from here, from what we're seeing, is it a couple of feet deep?
I have not measured any depths out there or anything like that. As far as submerged lands, as long as it is underwater, it's considered sovereign submerged land.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Chairman. Yes, Commissioner.
Are you, in kind of going over, have you ever heard of the David Smith Means high water case in Brevard where it dealt with this exact question, submerged lands, and it took about 12 years, I think, to go through the course, and I believe Mr. Smith eventually was deemed to be the appropriate owner based on the up and down movement of the water. And I see this as being very similar to that situation that happened up there, but wouldn't want to see something have to take 12 years to get resolved as it took that unfortunate defendant.
And I think you've made an excellent point for why we should execute a quitclaim deed. We don't have any desire to be involved in 12 years of litigation.
So why don't we give it to the defendant instead of the plaintiff?
Okay, then we give it to the defendants. Now we own the property, now we own the houses. As far as if we're going to say that they're ours, the first thing that we'll have to do is evict them. If they want to try and execute any sort of leases, that will have to be done at a public bidding. If you think that they aren't going to, I would seriously be surprised if the county owns the property that they're just going to go away. I don't think that they're going to bring a boat out there or a barge and pack up their belongings and simply move out because the county owned the property and we asked them nicely to leave. They're going to continue to litigate their position that they should be able to remain in the houses and assert some sort of ownership of the house. And that's why I'm bringing this forward at this time. We see an opportunity to rid ourselves of the potential litigation, put it where it properly belongs before the state, who claims it as submerged lands. We have never, the county has never issued any sort of claim over these submerged lands or anything like that. We've only maintained and asserted ownership over the parklands, not anything this far out into Blue Cypress Lake. Not only on Blue Cypress Lake, but on no other bodies of water as well. So that's why, that's the main reason why I'm bringing this forward is I don't know where it's going to end, and if I can get myself out of it at no cost to the county and no involvement, I don't think that's a bad deal at all.
Commissioner Zorton.
When those structures were rebuilt after the storms, did we issue them building permits?
We can find no records of any building permits.
That's what I was trying to point out.
Any other
I want to know where we were during that time of recovery. Obviously, these buildings didn't just grow with some heavy fertilizer. So, they were developed. They look pretty substantial, and they're a lot more than just your average fishing cabin that was traditionally out there at Middleton's Lake. They look, from here, from what we can see and what I've seen by looking at it a little closer, they're dwellings, and a lot of work has gone out there.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Bill, if the state prevails, is the state going to issue a submerged land lease to the owners and allow them to stay there?
No, they want them down.
It's my understanding that there has been some talk of a lease between the parties, but I defer to Mr. Vosell and Mr. Sullivan on negotiations.
That's not nice.
Any other questions from board? Anybody?
Here with
that's why I'm trying to get to that point. Yes.
I'd like to speak.
Please come on up. Give your name and address for the record.
All right. Chairman Davis and fellow commissioners. Yes, leave that there, please. Charles Sullivan, lawyer in Vero Beach, along with Mr. Vosell. We represent the parties who are the defendants in this action. By way of a little background, this lake wasn't even on any map in Florida until the middle of 1890s. It wasn't even known when Florida became a state. It was simply out there.
I remember.
It was, over the years, there was a fishing camp out there, and some people started building these little shacks there. I call them shacks, but they're not actually shacks. They're three substantial houses. They were furnished with electricity by Peace River. They had electricity there. They had commercial toilets there. And they'd been used for over there since sometime in the 40s. We don't know exactly when it was, but the earliest pictures were certainly in the late 40s or the 50s. B.L. Holman, original pioneer here, had that lake, owned it, and at some point in time filed a plat of that. When he platted that property, he then sold that property to the state for recreational purposes, all the property surrounding there and a lot of property around Fellsmere. He kept one little piece. I'm not sure how to work this, but
You want this on?
no, that right there.
Just point.
Oh, okay. They kept a place that was known as Lake Parcel L. He retained that. Now that Parcel L became Middleton's fish camp. That property, we had a title search on it and it was determined that the county, in fact, in the process of litigating this matter, where we were taking the position that they waited too long to sue and many other legal issues. But in the process of trying to find out, did the state really own this land? This was not navigable water now at all. It didn't have any high water mark or low water mark. It was just a marshy area. When we discovered that the title to this property, where those houses are, is actually in the name of the county. It's covered with the same deed that the Middleton Fish Camp is covered by. And the county, the state, in the process of this lawsuit, did offer us a lease, but only for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, it would be terminated. Our position is that what Mr. DeBrawl is doing, first, there is no pending litigation against the county at this time. There's nothing been filed in the lawsuit. There's been no attempt, or no mention by the state that they're going to sue the county. Then the county is really not the reason that they're coming to you now. They're trying to save themselves because they're going to lose this lawsuit because, as a fact, they claim to be owners. They're not owners under the title search. We've got titles, and we've got a survey by Carter, who was the original survey that shows that these houses, these stilt houses, were in fact within the confines of the same property that the county now owns that is used as Middleton's Park. So our position is that the county should keep the property and do with it as you want. If you want to lease it to these people, make them tear it down, whatever they want to do. But the county owns this property, not the state. And if you want to bail the state out of it, you can. But when you do that, you're going to make the whole fish camp, because it's all under the same deed, and they with themselves now would control those ramps, which we feel would be totally improper. Mr. Vosell has some legal things he'd like to mention to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Vosell, welcome. Name and address for the record, please.
Buck Vosell, 3333 20th Street, Vero Beach. I, along with Mr. Sullivan, represent the owners of the stilt homes in question. It's interesting because in a publication from 1898, the area south of Lake Helen Blazes, which is the southernmost lake in Brevard County, describes the area as a wild morass, a term that I was unfamiliar with until I read that. The actual area of Blue Cypress Lake was not even discovered until the west branch of the FEC came down through Ilaha, Nicktaw, and Yeehaw, which were all cypress camps at the time along the present route of 441. It was called Lake Wilmington back then. But Commissioner Davis brought up probably the most important point.
We're used to that up here.
Wait, you Davis? I see you had your humble pie this morning, Commissioner Davis. The most important point is that the state filed this action to make these folks tear these houses down at their own expense. That's what the lawsuit is about. They did propose a lease 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, the folks would have to tear the houses down at their own expense. It wasn't a deal at all. They refused to make it renewable under any theory, under any circumstances. They take the position that the lake is a navigable lake and therefore somehow they own these submerged lands. The high water mark of Blue Cypress Lake has never been defined, nor can it, because the state regulates the flow. They could flood out Middleton's fish camp. Yep. Another important point is that if Mr. DeBrawl's deed is signed as proposed, which would grant the state title to all the submerged lands westward of the high water mark, well, first of all, we don't know where that is, but it's certainly going to include the waters in the canal depicted on the southernmost portion of that photograph, which is the northernmost canal in the Three Finger Canals comprising the fish camp area. And you can see the homes there and the docks. It's also going to encompass Middleton's fish camp. So now the state, conceivably, is going to own all the water at Middleton's fish camp and in that top canal along with the docks. I'm not sure that's what the county wants. These homes are substantial. Peace River Electric has supplied electric out there. They have the commercial marine toilets installed in them. So there's no...
For the benefit of the public, explain that.
Well, it's a chemical-based system, so there's no sewage that's disposed into the lake whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. That's what they have on the big boats, et cetera. Same type of system. These folks have invested a lot of time and money in them. We we went to David Nolte, the property appraiser, and David Lucci, who is a board-certified surveyor with Carter & Associates. We also had a title search performed by Jason Beal at Coastal Title. This land is described as the north 800 feet of Lot L. Lot L was originally platted by the Fellsmere Farms Company back in 1911, 1912, when we were part of St. Lucie County. Matter of fact, the whole lake was platted. There's no mention in any of those deeds about submerged lands, about submerged waters, about anything. You can see on the eastern portion of the lake there's some platted lots. The lake itself is described as Lot K. So the lake was actually a platted portion. Of course, Fellsmere Farms went belly up. We became a county in 25, and B.L. Holman deeded what he owned, which was Lot L. He deeded the north 800 feet of Lot L to Indian River County in 1947. It's remained with the county ever since. The state took the depositions of Mr. Nolte and of Mr. Lucci, and the net effect of those depositions, which have been transcribed under oath, are that Indian River County owns that land, and it's within the north 800 feet of Lot L. There's no mention in any of the deeds about submerged lands, and we take issue with the state as to whether or not this is navigable or not, because the only place you can navigate in Blue Cypress Lake is from the fish camp around the perimeter of the lake and back to the fish camp, period. That's where it goes. It's probably the most pristine natural lake left in the state of Florida, and it's a valuable county asset. These folks want to live in these homes, whether they rent them from the county, whether they buy them from the county, start paying taxes on them. But if you open the door for the state to start controlling not only these homes, but the entire Middleton's Fish Camp waterway system and dock system, that is a huge problem. I think it was Commissioner O'Brien, one of the previous matters, talking about why you didn't want to get involved with the state. Well, this is a prime example. So we feel very, very strongly that the state is trying to do an end around because they do have some problems with the case. So how do they want to solve their problems? Have you deed them the land? We don't think that's fair. We think that's incredible arrogance on the part of the state. This is a valuable county resource, and we would ask you to deny the staff attorney's request for a quitclaim deed to the state.
Thank you, Mr. Purcell. Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody from the audience wish to speak on this issue? Commissioners?
Just a follow-up question for Bill, just to clarify. Your recommendation would be to convey the entire parcel back to the state, which would include the fish camp?
No. It would just be conveying the submerged lands. If you take a look at the aerial, you can, or at the monitor right now, you can see the lake identified as Lot K. You can see the remainder that Mr. Vosell spoke about as far as Lot L. If you take a look at the deed from the Holmans, you won't see any mention of Lot K. And I don't understand how we could become owners of part of a lake that's platted as a separate lot on this 1914 plat and have that encompassed in the description when it only describes Lot L and makes no mention of Lot K whatsoever. So as far as a legal issue, I can't understand how they can make that claim. That's county-owned property.
Let me just follow up, please, Mr. Chairman.
But you can use this side over here.
Bill, if you could put the original aerial back up.
Use that one that I've got, Bill, that I put up
there. Yeah. Two things. One is, if you go to the property appraiser's website, those shacks, whatever you want to call them, are included in the parcel owned by Indian River County. And I'm sure Mr. Nolte would never be wrong on something like this.
Sure.
I have utmost confidence in David.
He hasn't taxed them.
But I can also see that, drawing an original shoreline 100 years ago is iffy at best. And that to the right of those shacks, I can draw a line on the right side of that going down before those man-made canals were dug and say that was probably the original shoreline 100 years ago.
I agree with that.
And so that those shacks would be lying on those lands waterward of the ordinary high water line of Blue Cypress Lake. So, kind of how I look at this is, well, one, I think at this point the state coming in and trying to demand these, I don't think is proper or right. Two, I think an argument can be made that the original shoreline was to the right as we look at the picture of those parcels, in that if we deed this over, we are taking a side in the battle and siding with the state. So I think my preference at this point, Mr. Chairman, is just we take a neutral position and just let this case work out in the courts. And at some point down the road, we can dive into it. But my preference would be is we just take a wait and see approach and let this work out and let Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Vosell represent these owners. And once a court rules, then we can either say, yeah, it's ours, or no, we give it to the state. But
I appreciate what you're saying there, and I think that, it's kind of in my opinion, it's kind of this commission's job to look out for the little guy, and it's one of the things that I enjoy doing the most. And I don't think in this instance that I really do feel like we'd be like your advice may be good advice. I do understand that, but at the same time, I feel like that we are hurting the individuals by moving forward in that direction. And so I think that right now I'm willing to do nothing in this case. Commissioner Slaughter.
Yeah, I just want to say the way I've worked with the state the last few months, if I have a choice between protecting the interests of the state or protecting the interests of the citizens of Indian River County, I'm going for the citizens of Indian River County.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Commissioner.
Chairman,
you need a motion on that?
Was that a motion? Yeah.
Okay, I've heard no motion. Commissioner O'Brien's motion.
Okay, I would move that we just basically take no action on this item.
Yeah, that's a good second.
Okay. I got a motion from Commissioner O'Brien and a second from Commissioner Flesher.
Dylan, is that okay? I mean, the recommendation is to make it a quick claim deed. I'm just saying, let's not take any action and let the court case work out.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion? Anybody from the public wish to address this issue? Seeing none, all those, yes.
And Bill, I do appreciate you looking out for the county, and as you know, sometimes this board always doesn't take good advice, but we appreciate you bringing this forward to us.
As long as you give me the opportunity to say "I told you so" at some time in the future, those words may come back.
That can be part of the motion. That Bill DeBrawl can come back and tell us I told you so.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
That'll be on the attorney-client privilege, right?
Not yet, no. Okay, we'll proceed to vote if there's no further discussion. That's productive. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Councilor.
Our next item on the agenda would be the City of Vero Beach, Indian River Shores, Indian River County mediation update. Dylan.
Thank you very much. As you know, the City of Vero Beach, Indian River Shores, and the county have all been involved in the Florida governmental conflict resolution process. This is with respect to the City of Vero Beach's electric utility. On December 17th, we had a mediation. Commissioner O'Brien was there at the mediation. And as a result of that, there was a proposed interim mediation agreement that was approved by the city, the town, and by the county. The main points of that mediation agreement, or that interim mediation agreement, were that 1, the town would abate their lawsuit through March 2nd. The city would continue with all their best efforts moving forward with reducing electric rates. 3, the county and the town would be invited to be a part of that process. 4, the town and the county would be able to talk to potential electric service providers and examine their options as they move forward after the franchise agreement expires. And also that under the interim mediation agreement, the county would be able to proceed forward with the actions that it was considering taking at the Public Service Commission. Obviously, March 2nd has come and gone, and what happened before March 2nd was that on February 26th, the Town Council of Indian River Shores voted on a 3-2 vote to continue the cooling off period, continue under the terms of the interim mediation agreement through mid-May. So May 15th is their proposed new date for when the abeyance would be up, and they would be looking to host or hold a interim mediation again, or not interim, but a mediation once again sometime around May 1st. I've attended the town meeting and I've thought about it, and as you can see in our report, is my recommendation is the board to continue in that process. There's really nothing for us to lose by continuing along with the town in that process. We will be governed with all of the same terms now under the interim mediation agreement, so thus we'd be entitled to be invited to be a part of the process, continue to examine our options, and be able to move forward with our PSC item. With that, I turn it over to the board and just state that the county attorney recommends that we follow suit with the town and continue with the mediation process, and I just recommend that you take any input from the public before taking a vote.
All right. Commissioners, any questions?
I'll go ahead and move the stack recommendation and see if there's a second, and then see if the public has any comments.
Second. Got a motion from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner Zort. And is there any discussion of the board before I open it to the public? Seeing none. Anybody from the public wish to address this issue? Anyone? Okay, seeing none, we've got a motion on the floor again from Commissioner Slaughter, with a second from Commissioner Zort. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There you go. All right. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to go ahead and combine my two items because they're basically legislative updates. I'd like to ask Kate Cotner to come up to the podium so when I make a mistake, she can very quickly correct me and provide an update. I wanted to give this update today. I know a couple of us and some staff are going up to Tallahassee later this week. Kate will be up there as well, and she will provide us with a very full, detailed legislative report next week. But I thought it good to just touch on a couple things after the first week of session as this thing moves forward. The first thing going on, as you know, one of our legislative priorities has been the reauthorization of enterprise zones. There is, Senator Clemens has a bill out there, Senate Bill 392, which basically reauthorizes the enterprise zone program. However, everything we have heard from multiple sources said this thing is dead, that it has no support whatsoever in either house and probably will not go forward. There was a bill that came out of the House Economic Development and Tourism Subcommittee, 15-03. This one is a little onerous because basically it transfers all funding responsibility for enterprise zones to the local governments, and how they get around the constitutional no unfunded mandate is that it's designed where a local government may adopt by resolution establishing the local enterprise zone program. However, if we do that, then we must exempt qualified businesses for a minimum of 24 months from business taxes, impact fees, professional, business, or occupational regulatory fees, building permit fees, special assessments including solid waste disposal, fire and rescue, fire protection, sewer, stormwater, water and sewer line extensions. We must exempt them from our sign ordinance requirements. We must exempt them from tree and landscape ordinance requirements. And for 24 months, we cannot issue a civil code or ordinance infraction for any business. So basically, it's a very onerous bill. I don't think it's going to pass, but it's one out there just to have you all be aware of. And the whole enterprise zone thing, I think it's going to be a moving target. The Florida Association of Counties and the Florida League of Cities are working with the legislature to propose some changes, and so that'll be working its way through. Some other bills that are out there, there is a bill related to hazardous walking conditions where the school board can now sue the county if they determine there's a hazardous walking condition, and then the county would be responsible for remedial action. So that would be a financial impact to us. There's a bill, House Bill 391, which is related to the relocation of utilities and who pays for that cost and who can grant the right for those changes, and our staff, Public Works and Kate, are watching that. There's a bill requiring code enforcement officers to undertake mandatory training, and even though all of our code enforcement officers are properly certified, this would be a mandate and an expense to us. There is a couple of bills related to agritourism and ag exemptions, which I think from talking to Kate isn't a huge impact to us, but Florida Association of Counties is watching that. Obviously, you have the Amendment 1 stuff, and that's going to be a big, huge thing moving forward. There was a water bill that came out that passed the House. The big issue with the water bill was it removes any of the required nutrient guidelines and just kind of kicked everything back to best management practices. Apparently that water bill has support from the House Speaker, Chris Foley, and also Secretary of Agriculture, Adam Putnam. There's bills out there to reduce the sales tax on commercial leases by 1 cent, which will have a fiscal impact on counties. There's a kind of an anti-recapture bill out there. You know that if you have Save Our Homes and your assessed value is below the market value, it can still go up. And so this bill will take away that recapture rule. And if your market value falls, your assessed value can't go up. So I think that would continue to create that separation of different classes of taxpayers. There are several bills out there related to what they call a sober home, which is either a drug or alcohol rehabilitation home that can be placed in a residential area. And because the alcohol addiction or substance abuse addiction is considered a disability, these fall under the American with Disabilities Act and federal disability rules, and you cannot discriminate against them. So they basically have a blank check to move a treatment home into a residential area. I don't think we've had this issue yet in Indian River County, but Port St. Lucie, just to the south of us, had a couple of these come in, and has been an issue for them. Finally, there's one kind of a quirky thing out there. It's related to classified advertisement websites where the state or county would have to provide a safe haven for these things like Craigslist, or where somebody's buying something off Craigslist, they could go a designated safe haven, either a state or local building, to complete their transaction. Who knows what that'll cost us. And of course, medical marijuana is moving through, and I think Kate will have a full update on the juvenile justice costs. But last year we had a bill with a 50-50 split of the cost between state and local county governments, and then a 23-year payback for the overcharges. We didn't like the 23-year payback, but in the spirit of compromise, the FAC had agreed to the 50-50 and 23-year payback. The current bill out there is a state 40%, county 60% split, and no payback. So they're still working on that. And that, Mr. Chairman, is just a really brief whirlwind of what's going on in Tallahassee. And as I mentioned, Kate will have a very full, detailed update for us next week.
So just to summarize it, nobody's safe while the legislature is in session.
Absolutely.
I have one other item to add to that.
Yes.
Also, I had a conversation with Representative Mayfield yesterday, and they said while we're up there, if we feel inclined to support the Navy SEAL Museum expansion funding that's moving through the Transportation Committee, I think is where it's moving through next. She said any support would like to lend to that. And even though they're not in our county, they're a great resource and asset, and they're in our community doing projects and activities all the time. And
good draw. I mean, it's still
very good.
Very good draw.
I do have a question on that. I know there was talk about moving that thing to California. Has that?
No, I think this is. I don't know. I think it's to keep it here. I know the executive director said he'd like to keep it here, and I think if they have these resources to expand the museum, he's a very good at attracting these additional display items. He procured it all for the Navy SEAL teams, and he knows where it's at, where he can bring it into the museum if he has a place to put it. So I think that would anchor a long history of keeping that museum here on the Treasure Coast.
Super.
Fantastic. I just have one thing to add to that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm going to give, like Commissioner O'Brien said, a detailed update next week. If there's something in particular that you guys want me to discuss besides just the bills that I've been tracking that are going to affect the county, please come to me, and I'll make sure to include it in the update next week.
Super.
Thank you.
Do we need to? Are they after some kind of a formal resolution in support of the Navy SEALs?
I didn't ask, but maybe if you could check with Representative Mayfield's office that we would
ask her. Yeah,
go ahead and do it today.
We could do that. I have no problem with that. Just
Mr. Chairman,
direct staff to come back with a resolution in support of.
I think we should just go ahead and do it.
I got a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, and I'll second that.
Okay.
To come back with some kind of a resolution, get with Representative Mayfield's office, and find out who it needs to go to, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
We got a motion and a second on the resolution. Anybody to need to discuss further? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Kate, anything else?
Nope.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you staying on top of this. All right. Next, we move on to that was both of them. So we'll move on to Commissioner Zort.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first one, I'm kind of using old language, the IRL NEP versus the Indian River Lagoon Council. What I'd like to offer is, and I did not attend the meeting the other day, but getting a little bit of feedback of what took place there, is I think we've got some very valid points that Commissioner Solari has brought up, and so have you, Mr. Chairman, and also some of the other commissioners. I think in going back, looking at in an era where in Washington I worked with some groups where we had to meet with some not so friendly environmental regulators, and the choice was, well, do you sit at the table and at least try to express part of your opinions, or do you just say, we're not going to participate in all of it? And we found out that being at the table definitely had some benefits. And I know we're dealing with a lot of regionalism issues. We had 750, we've got the train, we've got other things, and this I don't want to necessarily put in the same bucket, but there are some similarities, so I know that's where some of our thoughts and feelings are coming from. But what was offered, if we would like to take advantage of it at some time, is a open dialogue with the director and some of the board members. I know you had an individual meeting with some of them, from what I was what they had mentioned, is to learn to see, is there any other areas of commonality that we might find a benefit of being part of. I have heard some talk of, if we're not necessarily part of this group, certain state and federal funding approaches that might be put forward by the council. How would we participate in those? Can we still submit projects to those if we're not part of the council? And I guess that we could. Then we also have each of the municipalities are trying to vie for space or a seat at the table, and they're trying to work out some agreement, I guess, how the cities might rotate a seat at the table with them coming up with the funding portion. But so one of my question would be is, would we ever be interested to have some of these folks come here, sit in front of us to have a discussion with them, or do you want to just let things stay where they are, or just, so it's kind of just to see where people's thoughts are. I know we heard some of those thoughts earlier when Mr. Lamson spoke, and so just throwing that out, that they have offered to come here in a public forum to be, I guess, grilled, if you'd like, to kind of put some of the things out on the table and see if that would change anything in our minds. So
our answer wasn't no. Our answer was no unless.
Right.
And that's really what it boiled down to. I mean, we said, but there's not a person up here that wouldn't be a part of that if it were all elected officials. And it doesn't have to be, it's not. It's all about the elected official from this community.
Right.
It's just the elected officials up and down that truly are going to that have some skin in the game, and are that buffer between the bureaucracy and the government. And I mean, that's the way our system was created. It really does. Everybody's got their own little take here about their concerns about this organization. Bob's, I really appreciated his more about the structure of how the genesis of it all. Mine is simply that type of government is not how our founding fathers of this country created our system. I mean, you have the ability, all in the same guise entity, to raise taxes, to regulate and permit projects, and then to do it. And there's no separation there whatsoever. And so, I personally no.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I think, I assume they're open to the public, so I think if Commissioner Slurry or maybe Commissioner Zork would like to continue to attend their meetings and keep abreast of what's going on, I would fully support authorizing the travel to go attend those meetings.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think they're going to come here in front of us.
I mean, they did offer. They said if they thought it would help to clear the air on a few things. I did get one of the answers of the kind of the fast track that it took, and one of the persons said, "Hey, I'll take blame for that because I wanted to be positioned potentially for funding requests for this legislative session due to the the positioning of the speaker to the north and our representatives or senators to the south, that it was a good time to try to be at the table with some things that they could ask for. As it turned out, with some of the delays, they weren't up and operational before session started, so that rushing didn't have a benefit at the end, looking back on it. But they said they'd be happy to come here for...
Well, that's kind of funny because they just had a special meeting that was supposed to do exactly what you're saying they're offering now, was to listen to our concerns and try to work those out. I think Commissioner Sari can tell us that nothing happened at that meeting. They just said, no, we're done, we're moving on.
Right.
There was a proposal that, okay, what if we say that not only does there need to be a majority vote, but there needs to be a majority of the 5 counties, or three votes of the counties to move a project forward. That was ignored, and they just charged right ahead. So I'm sorry, but I'm kind of feeling like we've been down this road before. It didn't, I mean, they know what our concerns are. Commissioner Sari represented them at this last meeting. They were shot down. I don't know where the big change of heart is.
Commissioner Sari?
I mean, I'm happy for them to come here. I've got 5 or 6 questions that I'd be happy to ask them. I mean, they lied directly to public officials time and time again. And I'd be happy to ask them about that and give them the documented evidence that upon which my statement that their lies is based, and see what they do this time. Last time, with the whole board around the table, I brought up the lies, and they just ignored me. I could not imagine a citizen coming before this dais and telling us that, well, I've got proof that your staff member lied to you, and us just going forward and ignoring it. But that's what they did, not once, but twice, because after they went through a round of things and the kumbaya moment after they would not ask the lie, I said, you know, this is exactly why we need a strong sunset clause, because this is a self-selected group, and you're not even going to face the issues. And again, they totally ignored it. And Mr. Reingold was there. Would you say it worked any different than that?
No, I think that's an accurate reflection of what happened. It's been, to follow up on what Commissioner O'Brien talked about, there was a proposal by actually Dr. Hanasek to have a majority of the counties have to be in favor of something, and that idea just went nowhere.
And I'd like to take it, since it's opened up, another step further, because there was a great article, which I recommend to anybody, in the Press Journal this past weekend by the Martin County taxpayer Richard Geisinger. And it's trust, one of the biggest challenges facing our nation's leader. And I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs of it. In truth, the American people want to trust their leaders. We want to have faith in what we hear. We also want government to be accountable. Unfortunately, we have been misled too many times. In the mid-1960s, our trust in government was as high as 80%. Then, as the result of Watergate and the Vietnam War, trust declined to 50%. Since then, trust in our government has dropped to an all-time low of 20 to 25%, depending upon how you calculate it. Now, more than ever, the American people want the truth. They want to know the plan and the goals. They want to be part of the decision-making process, and I agree with that. And I'm going to close this with just a line out of a Peggy Noonan article that was in the Wall Street Journal on February 14th. And in modern America, the stories is always lies. And we know that from Washington. I mean, whether it's about Benghazi, whether it's about the State Department's emails, whether it's about what the IRS is doing to conservative groups, the story is always lies. And I think that's a terrible condemnation of America today. And I was never prouder of this board when we stood up to the lies of the IRNEP bureaucracy. And I believe that we need to be steadfast in how we reply to that group. Thank you.
One other... Oh, go ahead.
I appreciate Commissioner Zorc bringing this to our attention and wanting to clear the air. I think maybe some of that might be clear now. But I don't think that the organization can do anything better than just explain what their intent was. They're not going to change the molecular structure or the composition, and it appears that this board is philosophically opposed in the design and composition of that board, and I don't think that's going to change. But I did note that I did read in one of the newspapers that a representative stated that we would not be negatively impacted by not being a member of the organization, and anticipating that perhaps maybe municipalities were going to step up to the plate. And with that said, I want to look at the main goal of what this organization is, and that's to address the concerns for the lagoon. Since 2007, and I think that Commissioner O'Brien stated a few of the projects, but since 2007 we have several nitrogen-reducing projects that our commission, our staff, has been working diligently even before the word of lagoon concern was even a topic, let alone a common topic, a daily discussion. And it's been a daily discussion with this government in Indian River County. So, and in close, we have a lagoon project, we have an oyster project, and $50,000, I believe it'll probably fund another couple of oyster projects. And we know that they're successful. We're seeing the results. We're awaiting the results of the Kilroy. We're on course with the Kilroy now. I think that I would not want to match all of the organizations that are represented, all of the municipalities, the counties, to what they have done to address the needs and concerns of the lagoon and to get at the cleaning of the lagoon more fervently than we have here in Indian River County. So we might gain by having them before us, but they also might gain by being before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zork?
I think, well, one, attending the meetings and just seeing what, and I don't, do you still attend those?
No, we're not a member.
I mean, we're not a member. So.
I mean, I'm serious. When I came home from the December 17th meeting of that, when I saw what happened and where they did it, I thought I was going to have to pull my car over and puke. And I'm serious about that. That was the worst day in my life as an elected official. Wow. And I am not going to be part of that group. I did all I could before that group changed. But, you know, if we don't understand that corruption is a problem and that this is part of the corruption which is eroding the fabric of our community and stand up for it, then we ought not even continue here. I mean, so, okay. As you see, I thought I was over on December 18th, but I'm clearly not. And personally, I am not going to attend it in its present format at all.
Okay. Well, I may take up the offer to just see where discussions might go with some of the members on an individual one-on-one basis. I don't think there's any sunshine law issues talking with representatives from other areas. I mean, I clearly understand what the concerns are, and a few minor tweaks would have made it more palatable for us that were not big asks the way I see it. And I'll let them know that I guess at the moment we aren't going to be requesting them to come here anytime soon, and maybe attend a meeting or two and just see where any dialogue or anything might be built to get some of those changes incorporated that might make us feel comfortable to participate.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or anything on that? Okay. All right.
And just assume Commissioner Zork travels, he's covered under blanket travel authorization, or should we?
Whatever we need to do for that. Anytime.
Make a motion because the auditors like the motion.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move that we authorize Commissioner Zork to attend the meetings of the Indian River Lagoon Council, or whatever they call it.
NEP.
NEP.
Yeah, the IRL NEP.
And
I'll second that.
Yeah, and so it's seconded there. I know the motion was for Commissioner Zork to attend there, but there may be hope if Commissioner Solari gets over the conditions that he was confronted with, that perhaps maybe he would like to go, or any one of us would like to go. So
you may want to make the offer broader just in case the commission wants to.
That's true. You don't have to include me in the motion anyway, because I never charged the dime to the taxpayers of Indian River County to go up there anyway. There would be no cost or need to do anything on my behalf. But
you look healthier now. So
and I'll vote against the motion just because I don't want in any way, any form, to be associated with the council in its present form.
I will amend it to include any commissioner or staff to travel.
Sure. Okay. I'm tempted to join you as commissioner. I'll go ahead and I'll support the motion just based on Commissioner Zork's desire to try to right the ship. So with that said, is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting. Okay. Commissioner Zork.
Yes, again, another popular topic here. Back when we took the vote on the Oslo boat ramp, I know and don't, or maybe somebody has the actual language of the motion that was passed, and what I think what the public thought it may have meant, and what my thought or feeling was what it meant at the time. But maybe that would be a good place to start, and then see what actually has transpired after that vote, and where do things sort of sit today.
Yeah, I'll just start with Chris.
Sure. Or maybe have Dylan do what was
Dylan, you want to do it?
It's your call. I have the motion, I have the minutes in front of me.
Okay, maybe you just read what was...
Go ahead and read.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be...
I also watched the video, so I didn't know if you wanted any comments from what I watched in the video, but I can tell you from the minutes it says, on motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Zork, by a 3-2 vote, Commissioners O'Brien and Davis opposed, the board tabled the Oslo boat ramp project for 3 to 5 years. That was the motion that was made. There were some other discussion in what I watched in the video, but I'd be happy to talk about that if that's the will of the board.
Yeah, and let me explain, I think what the issue is. We had applied for a permit with St. John's, and my staff came to me after the meeting we had applied. We were in the process, and they said, the staff came to me and says, do we continue getting the permit? And I said yes, because we've had put a lot of work in. It cost $5,000 for the permit. And when you said you were going to table it for 3 to 5 years, we would have the permit, wouldn't have to recreate it if you wanted to move forward, and it wouldn't be money just thrown away. So that's how I looked at it.
You'd already paid the $5,000.
Yes, we had.
Could we have gotten the $5,000 back?
No.
Okay, just.
Okay.
Well, I think
so I thought that was a
$200,000.
Well, we're just talking about the permit now.
Getting to that point.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was just I thought at that point we would just have it, and if we get it, we're just corresponding back with agencies as they have questions regarding the permit. Staff is corresponding. Now, staff asked me, what do they do? I directed them to continue getting the permit, and once we get the permit, we just put it on the shelf.
And it's good for how long? Anybody?
Most of the permits are good for 5 years.
Okay. All right.
And as a clarification, is there some of the permits that were only good for 12 months?
Well, some of and there were a total of 9 agencies that we were either getting approvals from or getting permits from. Some of the permits were in hand, some were not. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was one that we were continuing to correspond with, and that we had mentioned to Mr. Baird about following up on, because we had active correspondence with them. But some of them had variances that were only good for a year that we would have to follow up on. To do underwater excavation was one variance that we'd have to follow up on. But to answer your Commissioner's question, normally they're good for 5 years.
Okay. Yeah, part of my thinking was that the 3 to 5, thinking that all the permits were only good for 12 months, it wouldn't make any sense to pursue anything because they would be expired before the 3 to 5 year window hit. So in my mind, I put everything sort of that was not going anywhere. But I guess kind of continue on with just so we understand where we're at, who are we corresponding with, and
I think it's only is it the Army Corps?
Army Corps was the main agency that we were corresponding with. There are several permits that fall under Army Corps, like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, EPA, National Marine Fisheries. They were all waiting for the Corps permit to be in place before they would issue approval. Sure. But Army Corps was the main one.
Okay. Commissioner,
there's a possibility that could be a no as well, correct?
Oh, certainly. We have an active permit application in with them. We're trying to address all of their concerns, but they could turn us down. That's true.
So it could be turned down, and then we could be shelving a turned-down project.
We'd be shelving a denial, basically, yes.
Shelving it down. So I'm supportive of, Joe, I'm supportive of the action and staff's action. reminded that I wanted the project halted in perpetuity because I don't believe that the species that are dependent upon that area, that rely upon that refugia, that those factors will change in any way, shape, or form in 2 to 3 to 4 years that we had looked at. So there's no understanding that I have that we would be bringing this back. And I try to make that clear, the same as we did with charter government, where we completed the project and then we shelved it, hopefully in perpetuity. But we shelved a completed project. The taxpayer is due the completed project as it has been paid for in advance. But we hope the day never comes that we have to examine whichever way the results are from the Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that this was a pending permit application at the time you decided to table the matter for the 3 to 5 years. The permit with the Army Corps of Engineers had been submitted in total. We have not done any additional work, expended any additional funds. We're simply waiting for their response. That's it.
Yes.
And I'm good with that for my part. I mean, I certainly was not anticipating we were spending another dime on this project until if it came up before us again in 3 to 5 years. I think it's similar to what we did up in, I think it was a Sebastian with Utilities project where we got the permit just in case, and it was there. But I don't believe that we were going to go forward with this project at any time, actually, unless we learn a heck of a lot more about the lagoon that we don't know now. Sure. But I don't want to just terminate the possibility of it, given that we may learn something different. I mean, I think that what we don't know about the lagoon is still so much more than what we know, that we did the right thing on that day by just setting aside the project for a 3 to 5 year period.
Okay.
Get hit with the media.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
Well, actually, I think there may be. Can folk come up and speak? I don't know if there is anybody.
I would never deviate from what I always do. Of course they can.
Okay. Maybe open up to that, and then I think I'll have something to add at the end.
Chris, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think everything, we know where we stand on that.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. Okay. And is there anybody from the public that wishes to address this issue? Yes, Dr. Cox, welcome. Come on up and give your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Thank you. David Cox, 9495 Periwinkle Drive. Of course, being on the other side of the issue from at least two of the commissioners, our ears were primed to hear one thing. In that diffuse term table, we thought that meant defer, halt, all activities that were being funded by taxpayer dollars from that time forward. But the real reason to take more definitive action with respect to this permit application, and what I think should happen, is that you should direct staff to withdraw the permit. The reason to do that is because in 3 to 5 years, as was just pointed out, we can't predict what condition the natural resources in the lagoon are going to be. And the last reviews, the consultation letters from the commenting agencies, U.S. Fish and NMFS, National Marine Fisheries Service, they'll be 3 to 5 years out of date. And you wouldn't use a traffic study that was 3 to 5 years out of date for a project that was going to get built at the time. So I really think that the reason to take I recognize that in 3 to 5 years, a different commission could decide to go ahead with this project. And I would hope that there would be a mechanism in place to revisit the status of the manatees and the seagrasses at that time. But if this process continues, we'll have the assessments of those natural resources will be out of date by 3 to 5 years. And you may have authorization to do the project. That's my main concern, is that I would rather have the natural resources assessed closer to the time of potential construction.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cox.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? Ms. Boyd, welcome.
Hello, Susan Boyd, 8025 25th Street. I have very little to say because I've said it maybe in 10 speeches over the years here. But I think, Mr. Solari, trust. How can we trust you after, and by the way, I think we got this information through the Freedom of Information Act, too. That's how we found out what was going on. How can we trust our commissioners, our local government, if we all walked away here last October, I believe it was, thinking this really was tabled, that no more action would be taken. That's the definition in our minds, that it's tabled. And then we find out it actually isn't tabled, that there's some sort of subterfuge going on with the process. And as was just stated, once you get the one permit from, if you do, from the Army Corps of Engineers, then the next one follows, the next one follows, the next one follows, and the juggernaut keeps going. And your citizens walked out of this building finally feeling that our voices were being heard, and now we really can't trust that that makes any difference. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Ma'am, can I say that was my decision to keep the permit moving, not the commission's? I thought that was a direction based on the motion, so that as I was just keeping it moving, I'm not sure they all knew, so I made that decision whether it was right or wrong.
So what you're saying is that the commissioners had no idea this was going on?
My staff asked me, and I said, since we had paid for the permit, we're in the middle of the application process, continue. They did ask me the question, so I made that decision whether it was right or wrong, not the commission. And if they give me other direction today, that'll happen.
I appreciate what you're trying to clarify, and thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Ms. Boyd, just so you know, the element of passion and concern that you just expressed, I assure you, Joe heard that from me as well, and other members of staff. I had great question as to, hey, it's moving, but when you step back and look, and think that this might have been turned down anyway, or might be turned down. And that's coming from somebody who did not want to see this project ever revisited, as you recall, that I believe that we are shelving a project regardless of the outcome. You, the people, have heard us. We voted, and that's not overturned. That this will you're getting your value, that the operation is being completed, and then it's parked. And I don't believe that there will be any discussion on this any further to change any option other than what you've heard this commission vote on.
All right, except that I think we'd trust it better if it just plain stopped, because I think that what happens here is if this permit's like the daddy permit, so if that does get issued, then that allows the other permits to begin getting issued, and that's what I mean by like the juggernaut. It just never dies. So the best way to let it die is to stop it right now. Just stop it. And that by writing a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers and saying we do not wish to further pursue this and we will get back to you in 3 to 5 years. I mean, it just seems to me unless we're willing to do that, we haven't really addressed the issue, because something keeps this alive. We don't know what it is, but something keeps it alive week after week, month after month, year after year. And unless we're going to actually be true to what we said we were going to do, which was table it, then it isn't tabled. It's still marching forward. And I think that's probably what we're concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out, it may be semantics, but the use of the word table does imply that something is coming back. As an example, on October 7th, when Commissioner Solari made his first motion, the minutes state that Commissioner Zork requested that Commissioner Solari amend his motion to table this item until October 21st. So clearly, when we tabled it at that point in time, the use of the word table means we were postponing action into a date in the future. This project was tabled to some point in the future, a 3 to 5 year window. So, I'm sorry if everybody thought the word table meant kill, but table means it's postponed, not killed. And that was the motion. Actually, according to the minutes, Commissioner Solari's original motion was to delay the boat ramp project for 3 to 5 years. On the 21st, the minutes reflect the vote was to table the boat ramp. Both those words, delay and table, connotate some action in the future and not a permanent resolution. So I apologize if you all didn't understand it that way, but we routinely table things with the idea that it's going to come back to us at a point in the future. That's the use of the word table. So,
Commissioner O'Brien, just following up on that, I recall at both the 7th and the 21st meetings in October that the board asked the status of the Army Corps of Engineers permit, and that the board was informed by staff at that time that the permit was pending. And in response to that, the Corps received a number of letters from interested people asking to deny the permit, to the point where the Army Corps wrote us a letter following the tabling of the boat ramp project, asking us if we wanted to withdraw our permit. And at that time we were informed them, no, we didn't want to withdraw. It was simply tabled, and that we want to continue with the process. And that was in response to the letters that were received from ostensibly the same people that are appearing before you now. So I don't understand any kind of misinterpretation of the word table.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Yvonne Cho, 4164 Abington Woods Circle. And first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I've never done this before, so I'm a little bit nervous. But I have to do the same as what the lady before me did, which was, it's about trust. At least one of the commissioners was quoted as saying that this was pretty much going to kill the project when you voted to delay or table or whatever it was last time. And so I and a lot of other people believed that. And so now to hear that, no, it could come back, and especially if the permit is granted, then it's very easy for it to come back. I just, it's very disheartening. And furthermore, the letter from Mr. Nixon back to the Army Corps of Engineers was, in my opinion, it was pretty unprofessional. A lot of citizens and citizen testimony was bad-mouthed, and I personally don't think that that's very professional. And so I agree with the lady before me. It's like, what is it that's pushing this project? You know, certainly if you value your citizens' opinions, then you've heard it. You've taken steps, you know, to agree with it in some senses. So why not stop the permit? I guess that's my ask, is please stop. Please write back to the Corps and say, we're withdrawing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Yes, sir.
I don't see real well, so. Okay. My name is Tom Ellsworth. I live at 1414 21st Street, apartment number 5. I'm a full-time resident of Vero Beach. Maybe we ought to just define precisely what we mean by whatever action it is that we are taking right now with regard to the Oslo boat ramp. If we don't need to use a word like table. We need to say go ahead with it or not go ahead with it, or something really definitive. And I would appreciate it if all the commissioners would just, you know, let's be really specific for a minute. You know, kind of not be politicians, kind of be just real people. And let's see if we can just define where we are so that everybody knows and there are no misunderstandings. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Well, I can be specific. I thought I was specific, and I thought it was not being like a politician and just like ordinary people. If I'm at home and I tell, and Jackie says she wants to renovate a room, and I say we're not going to renovate the room for 3 to 5 years, that's pretty plain and specific. And I thought that's the exact same thing I did here. And the reason I did that was because there was a wide spectrum of activity. There were a group of people who wanted the boat ramp to go ahead. There are a group of people who didn't want the boat ramp to go ahead. And to me, a large group of people that thought that it was the most prudent and reasonable thing was to simply table the project until the lagoon was in much better health. And with limited resources, why would you use any of your resources to do something at this time which might harm the health, rather than using all those resources to put the lagoon into better condition? So that was what I was trying to get at the time, especially at the time when the vote was 1-4. I thought that if we got to a very reasonable middle ground, which is what I thought this board got to, that we would have accomplished something good. And the idea that this may come back before us in 3 to 5 years, I think is a good thing. I mean, everybody knows I'm a big fan of open, contentious debate. And the difference between here in this chamber as opposed to a regional bureaucracy is that we actually have open, contentious debate here. And that is one of the reasons why I believe that there's a much higher degree of trust for this board, and rightfully so, than in some regional boards. So I believe still that we did the right thing when last time we voted on it, and I think this is the right thing from everything I've heard from people in the community that was broadly, not universally, but broadly well accepted.
Anything else? Welcome. Yes,
Can I still
ma'am.
make a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, and thank you for everybody staying here this long and,
Yes.
and your input on it. I know some were nervous and got a lot to do, so we welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Corey Westbrook, 1955 3rd Street, Vero Beach. The letter from Michael Nixon to Irene Sadowski, I mean, it starts with the first sentences. This is to inform you that Indian River County does not plan to withdraw the project. It doesn't, if it was worded differently, pursue a permit so in the future. This letter is very aggressive, and it's, you know, we want the permit today. What's the last sentence? Issue the permit issued at this time. It doesn't have anything about, so in the future we're ready if we decide to move forward. And as was already stated by Dr. Cox, the circumstances in 3 to 5 years might be different, and the permit, we would need a new permit anyway. So it's kind of like, because we're hoping the lagoon improves, right? So the health comes back. So I just feel like, reiterating what other people were saying, that when everyone heard it was tabled, there wasn't a discussion at that meeting in October, like, we'll still go ahead and get the core permit so that we're ready in 3 to 5 years. And that would have been a little bit more open. So I just feel like the public and the people I've talked to feel like they were not necessarily tricked or betrayed, but there is some suspicion, and that this clarification that you'd already paid the $5,000 was never mentioned at any point. And this letter is really kind of insulting to the public. So I just want to make that point. And also, I left my BlackBerry up there. Do you mind if I come up there and get it?
Oh.
Thank you for your time.
That's what's been ringing all morning.
I was pretty sure it was
My
not
question is,
Commissioner Solari's.
how were you able to be separated from it for that long? That's the question. I bet. Anytime. Thank you for coming down.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond just to the letter.
Sure.
Mr. Nixon's letter was responding actually to a letter from Irene Sadowski, their Chief of Permits for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And in her letter to the county, she basically gave us two options. It was either to withdraw the permit application, and if we didn't plan to withdraw it, respond with more information. And that's what Mr. Nixon tried to do. They kind of painted us into a corner and gave us two options, either withdraw the permit or respond with more information. So that's why his response went back the way it did.
Okay.
And I want to take full responsibility. Mr. Nixon only took direction from me to move forward. That was my understanding, whether it was right or wrong. My staff asked me, and I said, I think that we keep the permit alive, and because we're postponing it 4 to 5 years, it'll be in place.
Okay. Dr. Baker, welcome.
Yes, Richard Baker. I'm in Sebastian. I too thought it was going to be a dead issue for 3 to 5 years. And I heard the county attorney speaking up at FIT as for some students and faculty, and I attended that. And he was praising you, the county commission, for responding to the public, responding to the motions and the wishes of the public, and how great you were doing on that. And I thought you did. You did respond to a dozen PhDs, scientists, the community, various fishermen, conservationists, to the meetings we had about 3 sessions of this. Some of them went on for, I think, 10 hours, where you were listening to the public. And then I thought that was ending. But it only takes one more vote, and you're going to have 3-2 going the other way once Mr. Burrell gets his, as he said in the press, his permit in his pocket. You're going to be able to vote 3-2 to go ahead with the project. So I don't see that. I think the battle is on. We've been fighting this since 2003. This has been a long time issue. We're, 14 years into this thing now? 13. So I would think you make a decision. Do you want to do the project or you don't want to do the project? You can always come back and say you want to do the project later, but at the moment right now, you have to make a decision. Are you going to do it? Because we're going to be fighting it. We're going to be arguing with the Corps, the NIMS, Fish and Wildlife Service. This is just an ongoing thing. I would think we'd try to get it settled. Have maybe a compromise even, but we need to talk this over. I can't believe that Mr. Nixon says, oh yes, we're going to go ahead with this project, when I thought you guys had tabled it. And tables to me is, it stops. It stops. And you could bring it up again, but the project stops. You don't have your staff going ahead working on a project when I thought you were going to stop it. But you didn't stop it. You're continuing on. And so Mr. Baird, he makes a decision for you, interprets what you said, and I don't think it's right. Sorry.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you for your time. Anybody else wish to speak? Come on up.
Do a line.
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Graham Cox, 1213 George Street in Sebastian. I just want to be very brief. You have an opportunity this week or next week to say for sure whether this thing is dead, as Dr. Baker said. I'd like to see you drive a stake through the heart of this project, and so we can get on with some more useful things dealing with the lagoon and the future quality of life in the lagoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's kind of unusual. I don't live in Vero Beach. I live in Manatee County. Proper address is Anna Maria. And I'm a waterman. And I live in a motorhome and on boats, sailing boats. And I'm thinking about moving to Vero Beach. And I sat through the hours of testimony here, the last meeting here in October. And just from a very objective opinion, I'm not worried about somebody coming after me. And I'm interested in opening up the debate. The real debate here is who and why are at least two of you up here pushing this agenda. And I have this feeling, and I have a background in water, I have a background in real estate. And there's two issues. The first is someone's ego. The second is the 95 interchange and real estate interests. And that's what I think. I haven't heard nothing about any of this. Who is pushing this and why? Everybody says, follow the money. Well, there's a very few that stand to win, and a lot of animals and fish that stand to lose. And these fish go to Manatee County, and they go to the Bahamas, where I just was for a month on a boat. The lionfish go there, and so do the snook, so do the permits that come from this lagoon. So someone stand up and find out why this is being pushed in this county before I move here. And I think this is one of the best left places in Florida to live. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Claudette Pelletier, 1655 Shuckers Point in Vero Beach. I just want to briefly add that when you say you table something, rather than nitpick the definition of tabled, sure. I think if you're acting in good faith, actively pursuing a permit during that time period does not seem like good faith to me. If you're tabling it, you're not actively pursuing the permit. And I'd just like to ask that you table the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Orr?
Well, thank you for the discussion. And where I'm at, I'm not comfortable with the perception of what the people in the community feel took place and where we're at. I know in 3 to 5 years, the critical snook and the other habitat, it's been there for 100 years or longer. It's not going to be gone in 3 to 5 years. I should also mention that I've had a couple of meetings with some interested folks on looking from 45th Street to the South County line. Is there a more appropriate place to put a boat access facility? And I said the first thing we did with the map is let's X out all the places that we should never look at, and what does that leave left for us to consider looking at? And these have been just informal discussions with some of the folks in the room. Some have already left today. To look at where's a more appropriate place to put something that also could be something that has more than just limited parking, no restrooms, no park benches, no other community features, where our off-site mitigation cost is driving up the cost of the project. From my financial side, it's not a very good risk-reward, setting aside the environmental concerns, is that if you took that same $2 million potential plus dollars and parked it at a place that has less requirements, you could have a much better community feature if you could find a place that was suitable, that didn't interfere with the critical fish habitat in the seagrass areas. Some I've talked up by the power plant area. You've got a lot of great water access there that's owned by the city. Fine's got some parcels. So we've met twice and looked at some of those. But going back to the Oslo side, the things that are there today may be healthier, but does that mean we would still want to disturb them in 3 to 5 years? And my opinion is I'd rather not. The people that are using it seem to manage fairly well down there. Parking is tight, but they have some kind of an honor system for parking, and everybody seems to get along pretty well. I haven't pulled any requests for 911 down there, but it seems to be, sometimes if I'm just driving to Fort Pierce, I'll just go down there and park for a few minutes and just see. Sometimes there's one car, sometimes there's 8 or 9, whether it's a kayak or a small motorboat. But I'd like to provide the community with more certainty, which is what they think they received back when we voted on this originally. And I know normally on these items we don't do motions.
Go ahead.
But if there is I'm just trying to think of the best way to word this would be, if we, not using the word table, since that's, that we cease any additional efforts to secure any of the permits for the Oslo boat ramp.
Second.
Got a motion from...
I just give me direction. I mean, I'm the one that made the decision. Right. If you all just give me direction, I'll go either way. I gave my staff direction. That's why I don't want them blamed for this. I made the decision. So you just give me direction.
I mean, I get that part, so I'm not focusing on that part. I'm more of what the people thought we were providing them. And in 3 to 5 years from now, if people still want to look at that, we can still evaluate that. I do think there are potentially some other sites that would provide much more benefit to the community overall, that's in what I call a safe zone, that doesn't have these things. And at these meetings we've talked about, well, how can we create a critical fish habitat area for those fish, because they're there, they're not going unless we do something that makes them leave. So I think maybe there's some other things we might look at, or they can do them on their own. You can do submittals to Fish and Wildlife for areas of concern as they relate to certain species habitat and things. So,
all right, got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, just Commissioner, I think you're chasing a red herring.
I agree.
If you think any of these environmental people will ever allow you to dredge a new channel, okay? We had 5 or 6 scientific seagrass surveys, 3 of them performed by St. John's, that said in the existing channel where we wanted to remove muck, there is less than 0.1% seagrass coverage. okay? And they still oppose that. Now, you go anywhere else, okay, and they find 3 blades of seagrass, they are going to fight you to the death because they're going to say it's critical habitat. You are totally barking up a wrong tree thinking they will ever approve dredging a new channel anywhere, okay? No, folks.
Please.
The other thing is, Commissioner, have you been down to the Round Island Park on the riverside?
Yes, the boat access ramp on the
Right,
west
okay.
side.
Now, that used to be an old dirt road, a lot of Australian pine, a lot of high crime. County went in there and built a very, very nice public facility. And I drove down there Sunday. There's people fishing, there's people kayaking, there's manatees down there. When you go out the channel, there's seagrasses out there when you get past the point. Everybody's living in harmony. You don't hear any of these folks complaining about that. As a matter of fact, some of the professional kayak people run their commercial operations out of there, and it's a very, very nice public park providing a balance between access for the public and maintaining all those natural resources. No one I bet that thing's been there 15 years like that now. No one has said, gosh, look at how bad this is. They utilize it. The kayak people take tours there because the wildlife is there, the birds are there, the fish. And that's what I envision at Oslo. You have a South County facility. We have an existing ramp. We have an existing channel. And you are not going to find that anywhere along the lagoon, and you'll never get a permit to dredge a new channel. I guarantee it.
Well, it partially to answer that, my thought of having the environmental groups designate areas of concern to them and then designating areas that could be looked at was, instead of us proposing a project and then putting it in front of them, is have them decide these are areas that we should really stay away from. These are areas where we have some opportunity. And that way, forming I don't want to say a partnership, but a mutual understanding that if we look at something in here, this would be an area that you would be supportive of if we're taking it away from here and moving up to a different spot. And again, it's a long way out. These have just been informal discussions, but I'd rather have them at the table first, take the map and cross out all the no areas and then see what's left and then explore those opportunities that they said, hey, these are conducive to something, and see where that goes.
Commissioner Solari.
Yeah, 2 things. One, the gentleman from Manatee talked about ego and the I-95 interchange. And I have to agree, there's plenty of ego on the dais, so we're all in agreement with that. And interestingly, Dr. Gilmore just came up on the I-95 interchange. It was actually the first time I thought about the connection between the I-95 interchange and the Oslo boat ramp was when I was on the river with Dr. Gilmore, and he was the one who brought it up. And I agreed with him that might in the future cause some concern, which was part of the process which had me bring my initial motion forward, which the first time I think was last February. So I agree with a lot of that. So the second thing is, Dr. Cox for once and a couple others mentioned that if we just change one member up here, we can change the way the vote goes. So I'd like to leave today's meeting giving both Dr. Cox and Dr. Baker an incentive to vote for me in the next election. So I'll have to be voting against the motion.
I love it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That don't sound too good.
So the commission is clear. The sum total of any staff activity since October 21st has been one letter in response to an Army Corps of Engineers inquiry. That's it. Simply one letter.
Okay. But go ahead, Commissioner.
Let me make it clear. We'll make it clear. I directed my staff to do it, and we're not hiding anything. I'm up front at that. So, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But don't say we're covering up anything.
No, and I don't believe that was the case, but, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Zorc had made the statement about the perception. That's what this is about. I actually was going to speak, and I wanted to draw Dr. Gilmore to the podium, and he's done that without any coaxing. But and I'm glad he did. But I just wanted to state that Commissioner O'Brien, when you stated that people have adapted to this beautiful environment that we have, yeah, the human species, we are the most adaptive of all species. The fish are not going to adapt to a change. And that's why I wanted to ask Dr. Gilmore to explain how long he would anticipate that these species would adapt to the change or choose another breeding ground or a different refugia. Thanks, Doc.
Thanks.
I didn't want to interfere with the vote, but I wanted to applaud a couple of the comments. One is that there are other locations, and some that would be spending, I think, our dollars more wisely and more easily developed. These fish, as far as our experience goes right now, and the research we've done over the years, will choose a location and use that location year after year. And now we're finding that larval fish actually use chemical cues and also sounds and all kinds of other things to find their critical habitat. That goes primarily for the fish that we put on our plates, the snook, tarpon. We go for fishing for tarpon or spotted sea trout. It doesn't go for mosquito fish, the prey. They're everywhere. I wanted to address Round Island, the example that Commissioner O'Brien gave, which is a great area, and I use that location as well. And we did studies there also for years. In fact, Commissioner O'Brien helped in those studies. But that area was filled long before we did our studies. It was filled probably in the 50s and 60s. Apparently there was going to be an access to Round Island at one time. Maybe some people who've been here back in the 50s and 60s might know about that. So the boat ramp there, which we welcomed actually, because it was a high crime area. My equipment was stolen there on more than one occasion. It's a beautiful park, etc., but that fill was there already. I mean, all the sediment which that park is sitting on, the boat ramp, etc., was there. And the work that was done there is admirable in that it teaches the public and it has sufficient space. Oslo, unfortunately, does not have the space. It just doesn't have the real estate there without taking out mangroves. And observing the development of Oslo Road, and it's still growing. I'm sure the population grew more this year. That particular location is so critical to our fisheries. And I'm not just saying that. That's what we were out there last night looking at fish spawning with the Harbor Branch crew. They're still spawning there off Oslo. So that's not going to change, I don't think, 3 years, 5 years from now, unless it increases, and that would be nice if it did. So I don't want to interfere with the vote, but I just had to address the...
Thank you.
Just a question for Dr. Gilmore. Notwithstanding the filicide, when Round Island was improved, I think arguably you could say it opened up a lot more parking, a lot more use there. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, but it was Australian pines. It was.
But I'm talking about the activity now. Right. So have you documented any decline in the resources there because of the increased activity at Round Island Park?
Unfortunately, it has been a major study site since. So.
Have you heard any anecdotal, or do you know that people still go there to fish? They go there to look at manatees. They go there on wildlife tours.
Right.
Okay. So
yes.
My point is the activity at the Oslo ramp isn't going to have a negative impact on the resources.
No, what I'm saying is Round Island is completely different as far as the habitat goes. You don't have shallow seagrass beds right off the boat ramp. You don't have the spawning in there adjacent to Round Island. You have larval fish coming in. In fact, they don't even go to our research, which you participated in, showed that the snook don't settle in that north culvert next to the boat ramp, but they settle in the south culvert, the most remote culvert. That was research done before the boat ramp was built, but the culvert was installed. That's a deep basin. The manatees love it. It's a great place for manatees to mate and nurse, but it's not a seagrass bed that's where spotted sea trout settle.
Right,
So
but
it's
my
always
point
quite
is,
different.
the increased activity, no one can document a negative impact. Okay?
Well,
And
what
I
I'm
see the
saying
same
is
thing
apples
at,
and oranges.
I see the same thing at Oslo. When you currently have the commercial fishing boats that run through there at high speed, and they have admitted they do that, and the fishery seems to be fine, all the resources are great, you tell us, I don't see how boats going slow speed through there can have a negative impact. No one has shown me any data to that effect.
We can't use Round Island to compare with Oslo simply because it's a completely different habitat. It's not a shallow seagrass bed.
Okay, well, you know, as Commissioner Sawyer said, you were the first one to bring up the Oslo interchange, and I think that's a stretch of the wildest imagination. If we put in limited 12 parking lots for trailers, then that's it. I don't care if 10,000 people get off that interchange. There's no parking there for them. So, you know, to me, that whole Oslo thing is a big red herring. And if we're worried about an interchange that people might come to our county, then we might as well just shut down everything. If we're just going to say, no, we're going to exclude everybody because we don't want them to come to our county. But if we put in a limit of 12 trailer parking spots, that's it. So I just see it as another great opportunity to put in a public facility like at Round Island that is a merge between the wildlife resources and public use and access, which seems to be a huge success story.
Well, all I can say is we do know it's a vital nursery habitat for 4 of our most valuable fishery species in Florida. And the tarpon the gentleman mentioned earlier do migrate from Indian River County to the Chesapeake Bay, migrate elsewhere in the Caribbean. So we did that with satellite tags. My colleagues did that long ago.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner.
Dr. Gilmore, you've been doing this marine science research gig about over 40 years, correct? Not to date you, okay? People see. But over 40 years. In your experience, have you seen a change in pattern of spawning areas into any great significance?
As far as their location where they spawn?
Yes.
Yeah, well, over that period of time, we found that, for instance, spotted sea trout, or one of our target species, returned to the same spawning site year after year after year. We first isolated those sites in Indian River County in 1978, and they are still using those sites today.
So we can't change where the chemical signature is left, but we can eradicate it.
I've tried to do that, yeah. We've put in culverts to impoundments at locations where we thought the fish would settle, and they didn't settle there. They consistently went back to the other locations. So there's some cue for a specific location to settle, and they go back using those cues.
As many of us watch migratory birds fly above us, they can't see the fish because they're not in the water.
Yeah, unfortunately,
But
you can't.
if we screw up their pattern, what do they do next? Do they mate or they don't mate?
They go away.
If we remove a spawning site, we've removed a spawning site. Now, are they going to be able to go someplace else and spawn? It's doubtful. They'll probably compete with others for other favored spawning sites.
But then it becomes selection.
Yeah, which means we're losing some of the fishery.
Thank you, Doctor.
Grant, your spotted sea trout spawning site, is that out in the intercoastal?
Yes.
Okay. Where hundreds of boats run over that site every day. Big boats, barges, power boats, jet skis, hundreds of boats run over your sea trout spawning site every day. And yet they come back year after year, is that correct?
They are not spawning while the boats are running down the intercoastal. They spawn at night up to midnight. And in fact, we've documented now boat interference with spawning activity. So they don't spawn when the boating's occurring. It's after sunset. It's very quiet out there. We saw maybe one boat last night.
Okay, so the people that would launch at Oslo to go out fishing in the day won't interfere with the spotted seagrass spawning?
They're going to migrate from miles away to spawn at that site. But what that spawning site has done is it's released millions of eggs into the water column at that location, which are then going to settle in the shallow seagrasses adjacent to that location, and they're looking for the shallowest water possible. That's why they don't go to Round Island, they go to Oslo.
Right, and none of the project was going to deal anything in that seagrass. The only work was in the actual channel. So the seagrass will still be there, spawning site will still be there.
Well, we have documented seagrass in the channel, which the boat is marked and the boats go through, but that's so shallow in that area, and the whole area is so shallow, it's a preferred settlement site for spotted sea trout.
I understand that, but I just don't think removing the muck from that channel is going to negatively impact the seagrasses.
The muck you're talking about is at the base of the ramp, going out some feet from the
203 feet or 10 feet, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes that far out, but that material, anytime you dredge a deeper basin, you're going to have muck settling in it. And,
right.
So if you're going to take that out and leave a deep channel in its place, you're going to collect more muck in that.
And you know what? I'd be glad to re-dredge it every 5 years to get that out of the river. Because it's going to be sloughing off where your seagrasses are into that deep channel.
Oh, well, and that's a disturbance. It'd be nice just to keep it like it is.
Well, so. Grant, come on. You have to admit, every time we have a storm event or a big yacht goes down, those waves rolling into that shallow water resuspends that muck.
Mr. Chairman, this is turning into a debate, which is really not appropriate. So I believe we have a motion on the table.
I don't want to
so we ought to go ahead and call the vote.
Would you like? Do you have? You come up again. Feel free.
Yeah, my name is still Tom Ellsworth.
Just an hour older, right?
A little hour older. Yes, yes, sir. What are the benefits? I mean, really and truly, what are the benefits of a boat ramp at Oslo? I mean, I'm not aware, and I could easily not be aware, but are we having boat owners leave the county? Are we having people stopping fishing? I mean, Commissioner Zork, you say that there are few boat facilities in the county, and it's a shame, but we can't seem to find an alternative location. My question is, do we need any of them, including Oslo? I mean, it seems to me that, 10 years from now or something like that, we're going to have 200,000 people in Indian River County, and it may be another situation then, but by then we're going to be overusing the Indian River Lagoon to such an extent that you might as well call it a sewage channel. Mr. Solari brought up something at the October meeting. He said, look, if we don't know that something is going to help the lagoon, let's just don't do it. That is the safest and best thing you can do. It's a body of water. It's not really intended for humans to be out on it much. And so let the fish have it. You know, just let them be happy little fish out there. And they won't bother you. They're not going to come up on land and wreck your house or anything like that. They're just going to stay in the water and do their thing.
Just one of the big ones.
Anyway, I'm sorry to take your time. Have a go.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon, fellows. My name is Brendan Burke, 516 Conway, Vero Beach. I just wanted to point out, once again, in this whole discussion, where is the other side? Commissioner O'Brien, after our meeting, the final meeting, which you tabled the discussion, you read the letter from Ralph Popple, and there was another letter that you wrote. And with the exception of this gentleman, that seemed to be the nucleus of your team, of your side, which is, you can count them on 5 hands, on 5 fingers, maybe 5 hands. Who is the rest of your support to do this? That's what we want to know. Who is really doing this? We know Bill Posey.
They had a petition
Who's the
that
rest of you
the
guys?
Professional Outfitters, which is a...
Gary Reinhardt.
Yeah. So
And
he
you
had-
cited...
He had
and you
some
also-
900 signatures.
I was one of those signatures because those petitions went out in like 1998, and at that time, we didn't know what we know about Oslo, so I signed that too, and a bunch of people signed that are against Oslo today. So quit citing that because
Well,
it's inaccurate.
Just because a couple of you changed doesn't
It's
mean
not a
everybody
couple.
did, sir.
There's a vast amount of people. So I really don't think you really have the numbers you suggest. I think that's a glaring inaccuracy in everything you've said.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Appreciate you coming down.
Dan Farley, Sebastian, 437 Melrose Lane. Mr. O'Brien, sir, if you have all these people, why haven't they submitted a new petition?
Thank you.
We could, sure.
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of what was it?
It was about a half an hour ago, Mr. Chairman. You understand?
I believe the motion was by Commissioner Zork, seconded by Commissioner Flesher, and it was a motion to cease additional efforts to secure any permits. And
That's it.
please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's about it. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion fails 3-2.
Here you go.
Okay.
Oh, we still have more to do, don't we?
Yes, we do. That moves us to our special districts and boards.
Move approval of the minutes
Got a
of a certain meeting.
Got approval of the minutes for February 17th, 2015. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes. Did you get the mover and the second to that? I didn't. Okay. And then next we have the notice of the
Bill
special.
already read that.
Okay, thank you.
You already done that? You want?
All right. No,
we ought to
that's-
redo this one again. In case anybody is listening about, this is the date about the special call meeting
Was
for the
this
18th.
the time in which it should have
All
been
right,
announced?
super.
Can I ask a question? Is that
Hold on one second. Dylan, if you would, go ahead and reread that, if you would, regarding the special call meeting.
I'd be happy to do so. There, on March 3rd, 2015, the Solid Waste Disposal District Board approved a special call meeting to be held on Wednesday, March 18th, 2015, at 9 a.m. in the County Commission Chambers in Indian River County Administration Building A. The purpose of this meeting is to obtain public input and to award the solid waste and recyclables collection services.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may add, just for the public's notification, this day we're going to be talking about controversial things like whether or not we put ourselves on a path to close convenience centers, and so we'd rather you come now. I'm not saying we're going to do it, but the subject of mandatory pickup of trash will be at least discussed, so you ought to come now before we do something. Where the move from double stream to single stream recycling will be at least discussed. So any of you who are at all concerned about the way your trash is picked up, processed, delivered, this is the time to come and give us all your input and thoughts. Thank you very much.
And Commissioners, just to let you know, I'm trying to be as proactive as I possibly can with this by telling the residents, specifically the ones that reached out during the Winter Beach issue. I've got the list of phone calls from them, and I had a few emails, and I'm trying to send that out to, like Mr. Pinnell, you may remember.
Sure.
I'm trying just to let everybody know, because I think the one thing that staff did not deserve is the accusations that nobody knew about it. Although the community might not have been aware of it, it wasn't that. Again, it wasn't anything that they didn't try to let everybody know. And so I'm just trying to, I don't know what, head that off at the pass.
No,
this is just a
March
public
18th.
hearing. This is just to announce the public hearing on that meeting and the award for solid waste.
When's that meeting? March 18th.
At 9 o'clock? Yes, March 18th at 9 o'clock. Okay.
I just had a point of clarification.
Sure.
I just not.
Sure.
What did you vote for? Did you vote to continue actively pursuing permits?
Still trying to pursue the permit from the Army Corps.
So you have voted now to actively pursue permits?
No, that was the original. That happened way back when. That basically to stop was the.
So I don't understand what you voted for just now. What you voted against?
I'll explain.
They voted, as my understanding, because I'm going to direct my staff. So let me see what my understanding is. They voted to the permits we had applied for that were in the process to continue the process. That's it. We will not move any further.
Yep. And nothing will happen in less than 3 to 5 years. Nothing.
So if I'm just trying to clarify, because I know I'm going to get asked these questions. If the permits that are contingent on getting the Corps of Engineers, say the Corps of Engineers next month says yes, then there's other permits that were contingent on that. Will they be actively pursued because the Corps of Engineers said yes?
I think they all fall under St. John's, and they would be pursued to get the ending
so it's
result.
Just going on and on and on.
No, we won't move any further. They'll sit. Once we get them, we're not going to do another thing, but wait the 3 to 5 years, and it'll come back to a public meeting on whether to proceed from there. That was my understanding.
The motion was to stop that, and it died 3-2, or 2-3.
Right, I understand. So what? So the point is that they will keep actively pursuing permits.
Yeah, we've already made application for the permits, and all we're doing is keeping them active.
Thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. I understand.
But we're not going to pursue any new permits or initiate any new permitting
that haven't already been asked for and applied for.
You're going to get some by.
Well, they've all been asked for in the past, every single one of them. So that's why I interpret it as you're going to keep going.
In essence, one non-approval ceases all action.
Yeah, but who knows what's going to happen?
If there's no further business to be transacted.
All right, thanks for asking.
Absolutely.